or I think I called it the Way of the Mountain God, aka 自人. That's for you, Solar. Uh, Obviously, I'm Jin the Ninja, retired ninja, but ninja nonetheless. I host a show called Threshold Saints, which did just drop an episode with BD Salerno on Elvis and sort of like the American Martinists. It was about Kabbalah, it was about astrology, it was about a lot of different things. But it actually turned out really well. And I have a great Vajrayana episode coming up on tonight. Actually, will be published by date of record right after this is finished recording live. So I think that'll be of interest. And I didn't realize when I titled the space that it was going to intersect so much, but I think it maybe subconsciously I was just feeling the current of the mountain god. So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about. I think Taoism, Dharma, American Dharma, Yaksha subjugation, maybe practical. We're going to keep it really practical. I think Solar will appreciate that. And of course, I'm joined by my two amazing co-hosts, Solar Exile and Mike. And I'll let them introduce themselves. And of course, we'll shout out our other brother, Matt Murrah, who's currently at a concert. So he totally has a free pass. As long as he stays safe, and we're sending that vibe out, yeah, he's at liberty to do what he wants, or as he wills. So we're excited for him. He's experiencing America for the very first time. So I think that's cool. Okay, so why don't Solar and Mike, why don't you... Oh, Solar just dropped. Okay, well, when he comes back up, Mike, why don't you introduce yourself for right now?
Hello, great to be back. My name is Mike. I always have trouble introducing myself. I do a lot of different stuff with esoteric things, and lately, though, I've been doing some more astrology stuff, and I would love to actually talk more in depth about that once we actually start the space. But I do a lot of different things, and also collect art and do stuff with markets. So that's essentially my intro.
Okay, Solar Exile, go for it. My Naga.
Well, we'll see how long this connection holds out. I don't know what the deal is today, but it's always something. Hey, yeah, Solar Exile, nothing to plug currently. Got some things in the oven, and I'm a guy who sits.
Good job, Zogchen, bro. Proud of you. Sitting is the way. It really is. I had to listen to the episode and hear myself sound really smart and all the interesting Dharmic and Tantric things that I say. And then obviously the kid was a lot younger than me, and he's like, Jin, you're so cool. And because none of you ever say that, well, Mike does sometimes, but and Leo does, of course, and Vanessa does. Solar's more like, tell me what this is, tell me the secret. And I'm like, well, I'll explain it, but I'm more discursive. I can't, it doesn't just come in little bits, right? Like it takes me a little while to get there. But in the episode, I was thinking, wow, I actually sound like... He was like, you're so seasoned. And I was like, am I? And then, so I think the whole point is what I'm trying to say. It's interesting to hear myself back and from his perspective. Like, I don't consider myself that senior. I don't consider myself that accomplished or anything. Like, yes, I've had incredible experiences. I discuss them. We all discuss them. We've all had very incredible experiences in various things. And like, Dharma for me is it. And I think also for... I won't speak for anyone, but I think also for some other people, maybe Dharma is like very profound. And so for him, it was also that. But it was interesting because he listened to my initial series, and that is what made him want to even come on the show. And so it was like a praise of that, but then also like how much I've grown since doing that. And I just realized, like, yes, my focus, and like I hope what the Gray Lodge is, like, I know we're not trying to say it's all speculative, magic is real. Like, yes, both of those things are totally true. This is a speculative space, and magic is totally real. We come together in consent and synthesis, of course, all of that, and we expel all evil into space, of course. But I think also it is about maybe even laying seeds in like a non-gross way. Um, and no reference to the Tim thing either. I didn't even really think of that till now, but it's sort of it's like planting the garden of like what Dharma could be, just like ideas in the sort of the fertility of the aether wave. Now you might say, how can the aether wave be fertile? Well, the aether wave's not really fertile, but people have to take of the ideas and make of it. That's sort of what Tantra is in its essence, right? It is the upasaka in direct relationship with the text and also with his practice. It doesn't exist alone. And that is what the I'm sorry, guys. Maybe it's my connection. It is hurricane season, so I apologize. It's not raining currently, but it has been all day. But yeah, so that's basically what it is. I think that we try, and I think Solar brought this up last week, and I said this in the chat. I said, it's like I'm going to use very Warhammer, even though I don't know anything about Warhammer. Everything that I know from Warhammer, I learned from the wiki and Solar. So I'll just credit that right now. I've never played it. No one's ever asked me. No one's ever taught me. Nothing. So it is graffiti on the webway. It's graffiti on the hyperspace kingdom. Because if we're in the tunnels, maybe we are, maybe we aren't. It's a paradox, you could say. We're in the tunnels, but maybe conceptually, maybe even perceptually, we can break out of them. Okay. But maybe we leave these guide stones, these rune stones, glowing rune stones, of course, on the cave wall. So, we illuminate our path in future rebirths. I think that's a really interesting idea. Like, there was also something else that I thought was interesting that had a Warhammer connection. Like, people can take Tantra way too far. You can go off middle path. We talked about this a lot. But if you keep doing extreme view, it does impact your life. It does impact your life karmically. Like, I can speak to this very fundamentally, like very much like of my life. I'm not saying this is true for every single person. I'm not even talking about left-hand path. I'm just talking about anti-cosmic, just like that kind of thinking, that kind of like orientation. But we've been touching on this lately too. Like, Matzo was like, you can change your story. You can devise new. You can work out a new game for yourself. You have to change your orientation, change your view, change your perspective. And I think that is what I've learned these last few weeks a lot. Is that, like, yes, it was always there. Like, my current good mood, it was always there. But I had to sort of let certain things go. And so this has been kind of a weird year, but I hesitate to say it's been a bad year because it has been a very interesting and generative year. Because we do this and we talk about these things, and then everyone's fucking talking about it. And it's not just Kabbalah now. It is Tantra, and it's Taoism. And it is, although I hate Islam still, it is like this weird syncretic Taoist Sufism, which I reject, by the way. I am not into it. But it's fine. Do what you want. Do you will. But I thought, well, it is interesting since Solar and I are interviewing Paul Fredericks from the Demonosophy podcast coming up very soon. Why don't we talk about Taoism? Why don't we talk about like the interplay and the sort of interrelationship between Dharma and Taoism, at least in my opinion, and how it can manifest without, the Western populace having a textual even or personal relationship with Taoism. Like, they may not even know what that is. But maybe there is a way. Maybe there's just like and I cited this book on deep ecology in religion. There's a professor of religion. I didn't study under him. I didn't go to York, but he is a professor at York. He's one of the more prominent Taoist studies scholars, and he talks about how he sort of reduces alchemically, you could say, reduces Taoism down to sort of three principles. So first would be Ziren, which is the obviously title of the space. I was going to make Solar say it, but I'm not that mean. But I'm sure he could, to be honest, but probably better than me. But anyways, so spontaneity. It directly is with Wu Wei. So Wu Wei. I won't say it like that all the time, but I did it once, so once for posterity. So Ziren and Wu Wei. So I think this is interesting because it's like, what is that? It is basically what we always use as a metaphor. It's Quicksilver Surfers. I mean, that is what it is. It's spontaneity. It's the ability to shift. It's the ability to be flexible. It's the ability to not be fixed in place. The ability to dance. The ability to perceive yourself on the wave. To sort of feel your body. To be embodied, like fully in yourself, fully in your will. But you're also you're overcoming fear. Because what is surfing? Like, fundamentally, you are on the primordial ocean. And, we were joking about this, or I was joking about this in the chat about sharks in the tidal river. which is true. That was a true thing that really did happen. But that is what surfing is. It's like there is the unknown. There is like the beast. There is like the Leviathan. It's just beneath you. Yes, Mike, please go ahead.
Yeah, on this topic of Wu Wei and just going with stuff, I just want to give a short example, especially when I was in college and I was so confused. I mean, I think my path and the things that I'm passionate about are just inherently incredibly confusing. Like I'm often envious of the person who's like passionate about cooking or something, and it's just everyone has a kitchen in their house. But when you grow up in the West and you're more passionate about spiritual things, it can be really hard. And not only that, like the other side of like the technological things that I'm interested in, but like spiritual things and can be so hard. And like I was in college for a while, like literally 6, 7 years, because I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And the entire time I was just uncomfortable. I had anxiety. I was like, I don't like nothing feels right. I would tell my friends all the time, like, I don't want to do this. And I remember my friend was like, "You're the only one who's saying this." And I remember she was saying, why don't you try this or try? I'm like, I don't like doing that either. I don't like it was so challenging. And with that concept of Wu Wei, like that's how it really manifests. It's like that feeling, like when you're going against it, it's uncomfortable and it just sucks when you're stuck in that like grip um of not knowing why you're uncomfortable. And at the time, like to me now it's so clear, right? Like if I'm a lot more in sync with just like like intuitive hits and like feelings and like knowing where to go and like how to move. But when I was in college and I was just younger, I had no idea. I didn't know anything. Like I didn't even know what emotion was like in a more like fundamental concept. But like when you're like and even when you go like take a step further, even with like divination and like helps like that, like it's smart to move with your feelings, but sometimes your feelings are not always enough. Sometimes you need like some more help, and that's where like divination and other things come into play. And then you can make a lot more educated decisions about and make leaps that you would never be able to make just based off of your own like raw judgment.
So, Mike, we didn't discuss this last week, and or I didn't discuss this. You mentioned this, or the week before when you were here. I apologize. I can't always keep track. But whenever you spoke about your college experience, like I it was also very similar for me. Like I did not feel anything. Like I dabbled in a lot of different programs. I was like, oh, I'll take one class here. Eventually, I ended up synthesizing all of it because I ended up doing a multidisciplinary major, which was like a saving grace for me. So I could like sort of pick up all of those things I were extraneous, seemingly, and I was able to sort of make it into a degree. So that was the one sort of benefit to my college career, undergrad career at least, was that I was able to do that. But I agree, it was not. I know Leo and I have spoken privately. I won't like say any this thing personal, Leo, but it's hard. It's hard for a high IQ um like weird cell. Like I don't even know what else word to use it. It is difficult. It the modern like it's like Evola, right? Like I know someone was teasing me about reading Evola is like so 2019. I was like, well, I'm into it still, so I don't know. But it is revolt against the modern world. I mean, that is fundamentally it is kind of like that, right? Like I think we've all felt it. I think that well, I'll speak for myself. Like I think you all know I'm a fighter. I like to fight. I like tension, but not tension with my friends. I just like tension as in like I think it's good to challenge. I don't think it's good to like do it all the time or to like not have discernment and not be able to turn it off and to like wield it as a weapon against people who don't deserve it. No, trying to be more aeonic than that. And I also think like, yes, it is about balance, temperance, and justice. So maybe I'm misguided sometimes in the way I've done it in the past, but I'm moving forward. I would like to be more applied. And I think but I think that temperament of like tension and fire and wanting to do things like we talked about this with the Kenny G stuff, with all the Kenny G books. It's like society has locked people into the klipas, and it has. but it's not society per se, it's culture. Cultural management, cultural creation, culture itself. It's the dialectic. Hey Seth, what's up, my Naga? And Vanessa and Blue Art Bookery, of course, room shoutouts. I have to be careful now because we've had a couple. Well, we won't get into it, but we had a couple weirdos. But anyways, no, only people from the lodge am I acknowledging from now on. I'll just say that. You know, but so Solar will be able to speak to this way better than me. But I definitely feel like, yeah, Solar. We're talking about like revolt in the modern world, like how there's a sort of cultural condition that is stacked against like the high IQ dark cell. So if you want to chime in on that subject, you're welcome to.
No, I'll get my bearings in the conversation a little bit, but yeah, that tracks. Let's see where this is going. I feel like, yeah, you summoned me right on cue, apparently.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows, right? It's all dharmic, right? We're thinking dharmically, we're thinking aeonically. I don't know. Called you on the aether wave. But Mike was saying, okay, so yeah, Mike, why don't you explain, and then if there's more commentary, that probably would be good.
Wait, explain about what first? I was going to comment, but
okay, comment, and then but give like a little like let Solar hear like your experience of like college and how it was kind of like you weren't feeling the way. I'm sorry, I put you on the spot, Mike. I just meant like how you kind of struggled to find a major and you felt an anxiety, a tension in yourself when you were kind of contrary to what you feel like you should be doing now, and you feel like you're a lot more in yourself, embodied maybe. Okay, maybe Mike. Mike does have a spotty connection. He already told me, DM me, so maybe that is what it is. So I'll just carry it. So we were talking about like quick silver surfers. Hey, Avi, what's up? Everybody check out Avi. She has her yoga business she just launched. I think it's pinned to her profile, and she is in a warmer climb.
But
so
yeah,
we congratulate her. Okay, sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
Am I still connected? My connection is kind of choppy.
You
You
just
are.
came back.
You might
Okay.
be lagging very heavily, but go for it.
Okay. So, and I think I would actually say I'm like my body is more sensitive just to energy in general. So like if I'm kind of like doing something that doesn't feel right, I feel like it affects me more than like other people. And there's pros and cons to that, of course, because it just makes me more like a punching bag to like things that are like disharmonious or that feel disharmonious to me. But the pro is that I can move more with like the energy and like the way that the energy is like trying to guide me. But yeah, when I was younger, I didn't realize that at all. So it was just like extreme anxiety, like really bad like anxiety. I was depressed so many times. Like it was just I had no idea like how to get to where I wanted to be. But commenting on what you were saying just before that, I think like growing up as a millennial and just the millennial generation in general is a lot more socialist and like just communitarian and more not as rebellious. Like I think Gen X is more known for being rebellious as a generation, but millennials are not as rebellious, at least in like the common way that we define it. Like they're rebellious to like the boomers and like their way of life, but they're millennials are more like sensitive to like emotions. They're more like it's kind of you want to like fit in. It's looking out for each other. It's more like tight knit stuff, and like that's where I think a lot of like the political alignments of like socialism and things come are connected to that.
I totally agree. I mean, this is something that we've articulated before, I think, and just in like we're a weird generation. We're kind of like outside of time, you could even say, out of sync maybe. But maybe that's okay because we can also, move the wheel in our own minds, so it's totally fine. And yeah, I agree. I think that we look for coolness, but I think we look for coolness in consensus. I think that's a very millennial trait. But I'm like I also like that we like niche interests. Like, I think that is kind of more now, and I think the Zoomers kind of get that. Yeah, Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, they're both in the economic and the political sort of areas. Millennials kind of have this weird thing going on, right? Where we don't really, yeah, so the thing that we don't really revolt. We're not really a rebellious generation. I think that's totally true, right? We don't even really like carry on the pretense of trying to like directly challenge the system in the way that like a certain sort of cohort of boomers did back in the late 60s, like generation of 68, etc., right? um we like voted for Obama and felt really good about it, and then we like sat down in Zuccotti Park for like 6 months and worked through really, really painful like meetings that never went anywhere, and we like did something TM, right? But there was always kind of this like naive sort of reformist sentiment, like a sort of like a sort of naive belief in like collective action, right? That definitely like carries through. Like the average millennial doesn't like understand themselves like outside the system, even though they will go at great lengths to explain the great and many like systematic sort of shortcomings, right, of the system, and the sort of maybe even the impossibility of reforming it, but they don't really have that fight in them, most of it. Also, though, like on the economic and cultural level, and this is kind of where I'm not that I'm not interested in politics, but I don't know, increasingly as I kind of age, I think more culturally and economically, I guess. And yeah, so like definitely like the elder and middle millennials, this is more true, right? Like we definitely had this like sort of boutique economy going on, but we never fully removed ourselves, right? So in the same way, we never had that like separatist like impulse in the same way that like a certain segment of the boomers did, like going off and do kibbutz maxing, as you say, like doing the commune thing, like genuinely trying to separate, like Anabaptists or something like that, right? Like the millennial dream was to go set up shop. You got your fixie repair place next to the boutique fucking ice cream joint and all that shit, right? The record store. But you're still paying with American dollars. You're still existing within like a larger society, a city, et cetera, right? So there's this like weird like parallelism within like a greater unit, which doesn't, I mean, again, it's like practical in one sense, but on the other sense it like puts like pretty significant limitations on like the sort of like horizons of action, and even like the conceptual horizons, like that you're defining yourself through. So I don't know, just kind of an obvious observation there.
No, I thought that was great. I mean that it encapsulated exactly the mood, the sentiment. Every millennial in the room and every millennial listening back can identify with all of those points, and even the movement of history. So good job, Mike. Please go ahead.
I agree with all of that, and the reason I mentioned it is because, and Jin, you were saying how you act more rebellious, and I I think that goes against like the millennial theme, right? And it stands out because I think a lot of millennials don't want to be as rebellious in that way a lot of the times. Um, and it's more noticeable, I think, in certain communities. So, for instance, I'm I'm like there's different communities on Twitter that I'm in between, and I've noticed like the art community in particular, I feel like is the most representative of millennials and like woke type culture, in my opinion. I think the astrology community is also like kind of like that a little bit, but I think they're a little bit more open to being rebellious in like a spiritual sense. But like the art community is like not. It's like very very millennial, like very like millennial themed, and within that, it's very like everyone kind of thinks the same, and to like stand out and to like really like push people's like buttons and like say things that are um not what's the word PC is is not accepted. And I really like when people can like stir the pot a little bit. And of course like you can go a little bit too far when you're stirring the pot, and some when you come to like the role of stirring the pot, like it tends to happen sometimes, but I still like really really appreciate when people can stir the pot, because a lot of people cannot stir the pot, and it's really boring and annoying when you're just getting in line with like what everyone else is saying and doing all the time.
Let's just be clear. I was a born baddie, so so there's one person at least that knows some of my stories in this room. So I can't deny it now. But anyways, I'm sorry, Solar. Please go ahead.
Yeah, well, this kind of illustrates like a funny thing that happens when like myth and reality like don't necessarily line up, but also the way in which like you kind of have we end up as individuals and as like a generation of like playing the hand that we're dealt, which in this case means like engaging with the social myths that were handed down to us. Again, skipping Gen X because like I don't know, that's just kind of how it shook out from like essentially the foundational boomer myth. Not I'm not going to go into the like Nuremberg shit, but specifically like Vietnam War and the retrospective mythology around 68 through the like kind of anti-war movement, all that stuff, right? So millennials kind of took up we're playing with these ideas of the righteous underdog, like bold protester counterculture person and movement that challenges, that speaks truth to power, right? And through tenacity, and being on the right side of history kind of, triumphs over the big institutional power, right? But it's this fight, you gotta go to the meetings, you gotta march through the streets, all that shit, right? It's like it's the reimagining of the civil rights movement through to the like SDS and anti-war, all that shit, early 70s. Okay, with again a very particular sanitized version, right? We're leaving out a lot of stuff that went down. That's not the point. So we engage with that myth, right? We come out, we're fired up, we elect Obama. 2008 crash happens, all that stuff. And then so we started advancing, I say we, not necessarily personally, right? But like the foot soldiers of the sort of millennial progressive sensibility, we start, hey, we gotta respect the pronouns. We gotta do this trans thing, right? Gay marriage is national. And the HR department at Goldman Sachs says, yeah, okay, sounds good. Right. We'll yes, sir, right away, sir. We're on it. And I don't think we as a generation have really like figured out how to respond when we essentially get everything that we ask for, because all of our demands are completely within the scope of essentially like neoliberal, like hegemonic kind of boundaries, right? Like we're not actually making any like system challenging revolutionary demands. Again, not us personally, but just like as a generation, like all of our shit is social. It's essentially social questions. Like we think of like race stuff and gender stuff as being political questions, but like properly speaking, those are really like questions of social administration, social policy. They're not like properly political questions. And so the like international capitalist establishment's like, yeah, sure, man, no problem. You get what you want. Like that actually serves us, right? We get like Larry Fink off our back with this, ESG investment, like bullshit. Like, yeah, sure. And so we as a generation still have this mentality, right? We're still trying to reenact the thing that our parents told us was good and righteous to do, which is fight the long, righteous fight, right? But like all of those goals have been immediately achieved and totally captured. Like they were never actually outside, but they've definitely been totally captured by whatever establishment we think we're challenging as a sort of generation, right? From the millennial progressive perspective. And we're just like stuck in this weird like no man's land of like nonsense, right? Because we won, or not, again, not you and I, but like the progressive millennial won and doesn't know what the fuck to do because yeah, nothing actually changed. Like spoiler alert.
I mean, 100%. Like what? Like how to even follow that up? I think it's so funny right now because you made this joke a long time ago that we could even become libtards if we had to, like our group. And I was like, we're never fucking becoming libtards. But I have seen a centralizing or like a sort of, don't want to call it deracinating or even a de-radicalizing property, but you have seen people kind of moderate their politics or moderate the ways in which they articulate them. And I'm not, but everybody has kind of embraced the, well, some people, maybe not me, but other people, like normie people, right? Like I'm not normie, I'm never going to be, so, don't count me. But uh, I think, I think we're seeing a lot of false synthesis. That's actually what I thought coming into the space like a few days ago, thinking about like what we could talk about, because I did plan to do the Aleister Crowley book that we are going to do. I have the art ready for everything. And I guess we could have done it, but I just was like, well, if we're missing two of them, but yeah, I know you could have. I know you would have been fine, Solar, and me and Mike, obviously, as your co-host. But no, I think that we're seeing. I don't know. We're in a very decoherent period, but I think things are starting to make sense. I think there's a contour of like the narrative that is forming. So you're right. You're right about all of that. Like we got what quote unquote we wanted, and these aren't really political questions. And I think that it's interesting because it does. I was thinking like Mark David Chapman, like it's exactly that. It's like the neoliberal, like carnal ground. Like that's where we all exist. And it's always where we have existed. And you know it's so funny, like, yeah, I'm gonna get shit for saying this, but you know, Anna from Red Scare, one of the moments where I kind of got Hegel, not for the first time, but it kind of clicked for me even more, was something that she said, and she was like, yeah, we do live on the neoliberal carnal ground of ideas. She didn't call it a carnal ground. I think she called it a cemetery, but obviously I just changed it to my tantric language and it made sense. So yeah, I mean that's what it is. And so that I think that we should be generative and we should be able to have discussions that are necessarily not necessarily like within the confines, whatever that is. How can we have conversations outside the confines? I think that's a good question. But then also is thinking like in terms of things that we've asked for, victories that perhaps we've quote unquote won, although right, they're more concessionary. They're not really victories, they're sort of handed to us. But something you said to Cassandra before she deactivated, and by the way, I still talk to her all the time on IG. But but you said like Cassandra, like it's okay. Like you were like being like a cool Anka, as I'd call it. Like you were like it's okay. Like you know, like Zog's over, and I agree, and I totally agree. I think it was over years ago. I think the opinion. I think I'm a little ahead, maybe, and then I think that what happened was is that the wave had to sort of crescendo. I don't know. What do you think, Solar? Go for it.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to like clarify on that, like, because I feel like we live outside of time here in the Grey Lodge. I said Zog is dying, and there's absolutely nothing that can be done to change that trajectory. I think was my point. My point is that like Zog might outlive us, as in Cassandra and myself, like these physical bodies that we're rolling in right now. But like, unless we happen to respawn as like rabbits or like microbes that live for like 4 seconds, like we that next respawn, assuming we take another birth, of course, will outlive like the Zionist entity, etc. Right, and that like we're sort of on like a certain like you know dialectical trajectory or like world historical trajectory, right, and like that the pace of that change has accelerated pretty significantly like in the last like like 15, 20 years, like probably beyond what like most people thought in an optimistic way. So like it's like yeah, these horrors, not that the horrors of like the Mahasmashana will come to an end, right, but like the things that are that have their sort of attentional and moral and ethical hooks in us very strongly right now, like what she was referring to in terms of Zog, like that rest assured, my dear, like is coming to an end, right? Like even if we don't see it like in our lifetimes, but like, history is long in a sense. I do want to say though, where like in terms of this false synthesis, it kind of reminds me of like you start to see like really weird behaviors in like political like coalition forming, right? Like when you just if you're looking at these things purely as like mathematical models, which like where I went to school, trying to can I do this without doxing myself? Anyway, yeah, so like my poli sci department had a pretty um heavy like raw quantitative skew, like which is a little bit outdated now, but anyway, and so basically you get to you're playing like game theory and doing like you're trying to like statistically maximize like um coalition formation and stuff like that. But on the level of ideas, you get these some really weird things, and like you're seeing this now, right? So the left is like totally in stasis, like they're kind of going through this weird schism because like the old Zionist like liberal wing is in the process of being shedded off, like like a dead exoskeleton from the Democratic coalition. But on the far right, right, like in the sort of as MAGA collapses and all that stuff, right? You see the sort of like fighting for scraps and fighting kind of for the like ideological orientation of the post-Trump kind of whatever insurgent thing that's happening in American politics, and you see basically like different like coalitions trying to form and sort of people testing out new provisional syntheses of ideas that don't necessarily have anything to do with each other, right? Like it's like, okay, well, if we're gonna like not do the if the Christian nationalists are over there, are we Nietzschean vitalists, but then also like secular, but then also we can like have like these weird Buddhist overtones and like it's like kind of testing out these nonsensical syntheses, right? And a lot of that is just like A/B testing, right? And a lot of it is basically these like really like instantaneous or like temporally microscopic like bursts of like, does this gain me anything? Like if I like if I bring these six ideas, these six aesthetics or like subcultures together, like do I actually gain power from this or lose it? And then when we kind of and we test it for stability, and then it'll probably fall apart. It's like it's a weird like laboratory environment that we're living through in real time on the timeline right now. But it's only on like the American far right now. Like at least that I'm seeing. Like that's where that's happening.
No, I mean I agree. I mean we follow a lot of the same people. I mean I think that's exactly right. But I think it's so interesting because you hit it. Like it's aesthetics. That's how things penetrate the timeline. That's how things transcend time into the aether wave. It uses aesthetics as violence. This is something I've been thinking a lot about. So I don't know. It's just is it interesting? So is there any I'll ask you a question. Is there any ideas that you see that would form a natural coalition, or is there any coalitions that should be being built that are not being built? And also the Nassau question: can we discuss it or not?
Yeah, I don't, dude. I don't think no to the Natsau question, and again, I say this as a Hitler respecter or whatever. No, the conditions just don't obtain, man. We're not there. There's zero reason to like theoretically like retread like the first half of the 20th century, right? Like economic and social conditions are so different. We don't need to go there, but yeah, no, man. I mean, this isn't new. This isn't news to anyone, on the timeline, but I'm really, really interested to see if like basically, and I don't want to say anti-Christian in like the in the sense that people might hear that, but if a secular right wing can actually like take root, and one too that's like sort of that is culturally literate, interested in the classics, and that will also make it sort of open to Orientalist tendencies, right? And like hello, like hello, Grey Lodge, right? Like we're kind of there, in a lot of those like meeting points, right? But America has no sort of history of an aristocratic, like a sort of hierarchical capital T traditionalist right, since we're America, and also we're profoundly sort of insanely religious, right? In ways that I'm sympathetic to, but it means that our right wing has a particular character that's markedly different from that of like most of Western Europe, right? Um, and I'm not trying to reduce this down to all like BAP vitalist kind of shit. I think in a lot of ways, uh, that holds back the formation of like a sort of like secular right. He not him personally, but the sort of reliance on him as a figure. But anyway, man, I mean that's kind of like what I'm watching happen with interest.
I mean, I agree. Okay, so I'm not a Nassau. I just want to say, like, I'm not against the ideas though. I think I've proved that through doing like what we all do every Friday, usually every Friday. Is I will bring ideas that aren't necessarily comfortable for a lot of people. That doesn't mean it's like I'm delving into like the darkest thing, but I'm just like I want to look at things for their merit, first principle, right? Just rediscovery of text, and I think I don't know, Solar. Like for me, I don't know. I don't know if they have it, man. I just they don't seem to have like a lot of wherewithal, a lot of like backbone, like no principle. I don't know. That's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. Okay, Solar. Sorry, go ahead, and then Seth.
Yeah, no, I just really quickly like that side of things is much better about aesthetics posting, right? But as anyone who's spent time on the left knows, right? Like aesthetics are the easiest thing to co-opt as well, right? So cool. Now we're getting like Nietzschean vitalist like edits being put up by like the Department of Homeland Security or whatever the fuck. But like they can do that and yet fail to hit like Obama or Biden deportation numbers, right? Like your aesthetics, you can win, but you can also like win with aesthetics and not actually change anything in the short to medium term, you know? Whereas the like kind of Christian nationalist type people have terrible aesthetics. It's these like norm groids with like beards and they're like telling you not to jerk off or whatever. They're just the worst, right? Um, but they're rock solid, right? Because there's like hundreds of years of like different sort of strains of like like theonomy and sort of different like two kingdoms doctrine and stuff like that, right? So their sort of ideas are pre-packaged. Like there's different versions of it, but they're much better about that. But they again they can't sell their brand to save their life, but they're much harder to sort of co-opt because of that, for better or worse. I'll get out of the way now. I just wanted to point that out.
No, that was great. I'm glad that you responded to both things, like both times, and you clarified what I said that you said. Yeah, but I mean, you're right. But I just think that I'm more interested in like moving forward with ideas, I guess, and like I feel like the over reliance on, I'm going to say it, sort of the Western European ideas instead of more founding it on American ideas. I feel like that is a problem now. I think that's a paradox unresolved, and I don't like that, obviously, as a Kabbalah autist. And then also, I think that it's more interesting. I think Americans have more interesting ideas. I think I think this because I think that the formation of consciousness here is different through different things, through different processes. And I've lived in both places. So I'm just saying that I think Europe's turning in a different wheel. That's, if you want to me to give it like a metaphysical sort of like overtone, I think that is what it is. I don't think it's every country in Europe. I think that that's sort of in question, in flux. Anyways, I'm sorry, Seth, and then Mike.
Well, hello everyone. I have finally found a mic, and alas, I have returned to bother all of you once again. uh, so, I second Solar's point, and I've had a few conversations with people who I didn't even know who are more in the right-wing sphere. The thiamine guy, apparently. We had like a very trenchant conversation where I was just asking him. I was like, okay, so this is what's happening right now. Um, it was like one leftist protest or something. And then I asked him, I was like, so like, what's your plan? Like, do you think that Trump is actually in power? And they seemed, at least a few of them seem to be really, or haven't quite let go of, they think they've won, and their base of power is disintegrated so quickly that they, it's like they just can't let it go. They can't contend with reality, which I thought was pretty pitiable and lamentable. I didn't even think it would happen this fast. I thought, okay, he wins, and then it falls apart in 2 years. I did not expect for Trump to walk back on all of his promises and all this chaos and confusion. It hasn't even been a year yet it feels like it's been another term. So that was very funny. But when I asked him point blank, I was like, okay, so like, what's your plan? He's like, my plan is to win, whereas your plan is to sit back and be a naysayer. I was like, so I don't. So what is the breaking point for the MAGA right wing conservative people? Because if they can't even let go of this false consciousness right now to like actually cement something new, like is it just going to take like Obama 3.0, like Obama 2028 or something for them to finally to get it together? That's kind of my thinking at this point.
Well, that would be the continuity, right? An Obama like a Obama 3 or Obama whatever 2.0. That would be the continuity of like the neoliberal whatever. At least the dregs of it. I don't know if it would be like but I don't think that's what's going to happen. And also, the timeline isn't totally real. It's the ghost world. It's not completely real. And a lot of those MAGA blue check conservative like influencers, I'm being serious though. They are fake. A lot of that shit is bots. It really is. That's not me being like I know I follow a lot of like the Gen X kind of like podcaster types, but they're not wrong when they say that shit. There is a lot of bots on Twitter. And I just want to say hey to Joshua, I'm sorry. Dr. William Birkin, Joshua, our brother, our co-host, driving in the car right now. Oh yeah, Mike. Mike, you had your hand up. Please go. And then Solar. I know Solar has his hand up as well. Okay, maybe Mike's out of range. Whatever. Solar, go ahead, and then Mike can come back anytime.
Yeah. No, I so just kind of like rationally like gaming out, like how do these people respond? So before we get to like the terminally online people and like even offline, like the true MAGA partisans, right? Like you seem to be interfacing with, because I live in a deep red and like Trump specifically, not like whatever part of the Midwest. I mean 95% of these people are just going to feel sort of passively betrayed and go back to feeling dismal and unhopeful about the overall trajectory of the country, and you know keep drinking beer and watching college football, and that's going to be it. Can you still hear me all right? Sorry, it blooped.
No, you sound good.
Cool, yeah. Okay, so but more interestingly, right, so for the partisans, so these people are eventually going to have like one of two options, right? Or I guess three. So they can turn on Trump personally, right? Hold him personally responsible for the failures of quote unquote his movement, right? In a way that's like, no, fuck Trump. He failed to deliver. He betrayed us. The second option is to say, no, it's not Trump. He was essentially the stabbed in the back, right? He was failed by the people he put in around him. He trusted them and they let him down. Whatever narratives around that, right? And that one's the relevant option because that then further accelerates the erosion of the MAGA kind of movement post Trump, right? Like if Vance and all the his advisors and cabinet members, like if those are the people responsible for quote unquote betraying Trump in these people's minds, well then you can't really turn around on the TL and support JD Vance when he's like, standing in general election against like Gavin Newsom, right? At that point, like your brand, in order to stay coherent, right? Because you were all in on Trump, you have to be able to pin that failure on some external force. So you might be you might find yourself forced to support gruesome Newsom, all that bullshit or whatever, just to stay consistent in your narrative of why Trump failed and why you backed a loser and a failure, right? And then the third option is, I guess, to just like remain completely in like eternal delusion, right? The infinite waves of an ocean of Maya, right? Where like, we're winning, like, it's Trump Reich, where even when he loses, even when the Democratic Party takes control of, you know, Congress and the executive, we're still patriots in control, whatever. But yeah, I think the two, it's like, do you turn on Trump personally or do you turn on the people around Trump, which is more relevant for the future of the movement? Like, because yeah, these people are insane and they've got nowhere to go.
I agree. I agree. But I also think like the dialectic's a lot more complicated than I know you're not saying it's simple or you're not saying, but I do think it's very managed. I think that, people are put into silos, like your Kenny G episodes. They're put into silos and they, people with lacking agency have a hard time breaking out of that. Even I have a hard time at times breaking out of them. I think everybody does because it's such an easy thing to put ourselves in, like that sense aggregation, like that Maya is just a beautiful girl, but like what is the quality of the beautiful girl? She has to be empty. And I mean that in the Buddhist way, obviously. Yes, Mike, please go ahead.
Okay, cool. My connection is like super bad, so sorry about that. I keep going in and out, but I I'm not. I just want to pretense this by saying I'm not an expert on politics. I actually try not to pay attention to a lot of politics because I don't think a lot of it is that interesting to me at this point, or it just feels like very tribalistic, and it's not. There's not a lot of like constructive things coming out of, and it's just a lot of toxicity at this point. Like, a few years ago, I mean, when I was first getting out of college, I was like really invested with politics, and I was actually even considering majoring in political science. That I didn't end up doing that, but um, I I I just want to pretend that like I'm not an expert, but I do have my own opinions and like theories of how things are happening, especially from like the more like cyclical like polarity side. I'm not in terms of like the day to day like what's going on and like the strategies and like the different like operations. Like I don't really know what's going on with that. But I think with a lot of the different the history of like the cycles and how like political parties have changed, like that can be very interesting, and I think often that's like like very underlooked aspect of like what's going to happen next, because I think people are like very really honed in on like the details, but they're not like zoomed out at all. And I think that's like with anything, but like with politics especially. And with these different parties, and I mean it definitely, like with what Solar was saying, like I resonate with everything he's saying, with just how these different um like tribes within these parties are like kind of like mingling and like eventually trying to like branch out and create something else. And we're at this weird area where I think a lot of old identities are kind of dying, and we're seeing that a lot of things don't work. So it just takes time for people to like, a lot of us knew a lot of these things didn't work from the get-go, like, but now we're seeing it in action, like, okay, like now that it's in action, it doesn't work. And it's just, and this is, the people in this spaces are not the common like voter. Like the, I hate to like say, like when you're dealing with like populist politics, like it's run by people who are just making like such like single-minded choices. Like it's just not like an intelligent like thing at all. And that's what also what just like disinterests me, because it's like it's so like single-minded and like polarized. There's no like there's no, it's just so simple in the way that it's like polarized. But um what I've noticed, what I think is really interesting, like with the elements and like the archetypes, and this is something like the way that like the conservatives and like the Republican Party consists of like traditionalists and um libertarians essentially, and they've had to like unite to like create and to like have enough power to like have to change things like in the government. But it doesn't always have to be like that. And I've noticed like a lot of people who may like resonate more with like libertarian values or something, they're like they tend to not always agree with everything that Republicans are doing, like in terms of with more traditionalist things and like their views on more like social aspects, whereas the conservative Republicans are a lot more like staunch on that. And like these parties have flipped over time, and um, in the past in America, Republicans and Democrats literally were they had opposing political views, and it switched over time. And I think it's possible that could switch again. But I think as well, just that the Republican Party is kind of like the populist Republican Party is like kind of dying, and I think something else is going to have to spring out of that. And I also think that Trump is going to get blamed for a lot of the things that are happening. And as much as criticism I have for Trump, I don't think it's even his fault at all. I think it's literally just the cycles. Like he elected himself honestly at the worst time, and it's because the market is going to end up crashing and he's going to get blamed for it. And it's like a game of hot potato right now. Honestly, this is not a good time to be a leader, and I think there's like some like subtle currents of like people like you're not. This is why we haven't really been seeing a lot of good leaders, because I think there's like the good leaders are going to come eventually, like over maybe like the next like few decades. But I think now is like a really weird time, like just within the cycle, where there's bad leaders, and it's partially because it's a game of hot potato right now, and like whoever is leading right now is going to get blamed for everything, and it's not their fault no matter what like decisions they make. Like the economy is going to bust, like the dollar's inflating, like they're not going to solve that. Like what's going to happen is there's going to have to be something new that comes out of that.
I'll just say really quick, like you cannot. We live in the Leviathan, like we were just talking about. You cannot continue to build aggregation onto the Leviathan. That's like very basic Kabbalah. Like everyone who comes to these spaces should know that as a principle. You can't build on something that's so imperfect. So you can't keep just like it can't. You have to disaggregate first. So a little destruction is okay, but I'm not saying the whole thing. I'm just saying, but like it's exactly what I think you guys are all talking about. But anyways, I'm sorry. I know Seth and Solar want to go ahead. So Seth, go ahead, and then Solar, go ahead.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the Leviathan, Jin, because a whale apparently, being especially the larger ones like blue whales, they survive with significant amounts of cancer in their body. It doesn't seem to bother them at all. So we all say it has to crash at some point, right? Like we're like watching this massive cancer metastasize in real time, just like in horror. Like surely this can't go on, but then it does. But I do wonder, and this is like the part of the Trump arc that I'm still invested in and interested in, because a lot of this actually begins with Obama. This literal cycle of debt, and I suppose whatever karmic cycle of debt that also imposes. Obama's refusal to write down the debts of homeowners and instead bailing out banks and whatnot, sort of very much directly ties to what we're experiencing now. His monetary policy choice to instead reify the creditors. My question is like, okay, we know this is about to crash or crash in a very significant big way that you just like can't ignore it anymore. I don't even think it matters because there's already a blueprint in place. Like as an executive, it's not even um Trump's choice anymore. Like he can't even make a meaningful decision if he wanted to, or even if there was like enough popular upheaval. The only choice he could possibly make in the situation where a crash, like an actual genuine crash occurs, like 2008 level fuckery, it, okay, well then we just bail out the main sector that's sort of propping everything up, which I'm not quite sure myself what that is at this point. Is it just like AI shitcoin? But I guess that's the point where like is that the slaying of the like when does the Leviathan get slain in this cycle is a question I'm interested in seeing how that'll play out.
It's up to you, Naga. That's what I think. Okay, Solar, please go ahead. I'll bring Mike up.
Cool. But I'll just again, if it's not like I have some systematic answer to that, but I do think that our thinking or on issues like this tends to be we tend to overemphasize the like significance of government, particularly national level government, because that's the paradigm that we've been in for a while now, right? Like since like the kind of institution of the Westphalian state, and then definitely like into modernity, right? Like once we kind of innovated the managerial state, it became like a much larger sort of force in everyone's lives, right? So it's like, oh my God, like how is this government that's taking on more and more debt going to intervene and save the situation, and I'm not saying that there aren't going to be like massive shocks or, massive oopsie moments or massive betrayals of quote unquote betrayals of the people, at the behest of the international creditors, etc. But I think possibly over time, like the kind of the way I'm trying to look at this is simply like what if globalization continues to accelerate, and the world, the wheel keeps on turning, and the sort of like scope and scale and power and relevance of the government at all levels, but particularly like at the level of the nation state, just kind of recedes over time. Not like in some huge dramatic way, but just like it sort of matters less and less what they do. But the main thing that I kind of want to say is like again, trying to kind of put the personal practice kind of into the political here is like for my part, like I okay, I'll start with like looking at the sort of American Dharma thing, right? So like American Dharma institutionally is dominated by these like I mean, I don't even know what to say. These sort of like aging like boomer liberal like things, right? Whether organizations, editorial boards, things like that. And these things are dinosaurs. They don't really get engagement, but like, for cultural and, institutional reasons, they have this momentum. But those things are going to be completely transformed in the next 10 to 15 years, just as nature takes its course, right? With their donor class that supports them, and with the leadership class that helms these institutions and stuff like that. So like American Dharma, I think is going to be a much more open field over the next 10 to 15 years. And that's just one area where I plan on basically having my elbows out, right? So even not thinking in like, what am I doing politically? But I want to tenaciously defend the spaces and subcultures and things that I'm involved in, to basically like just widen the Overton window and lessen the sort of systematic controls, the sort of like intellectual, quote unquote, ethical, moral norms that are governing those things, right? So like that means that if someone is, communist, anarchist, whatever, they have whatever, any kind of like left spectrum ideas. Hey man, that's totally cool. Like I'm not trying to run those people out of space, but I'm also trying to run cover and make it possible for people on, let's say, the far right, even in ways that I'm not, right? Like but for people to be part of things, right? Like I don't want the boomer lib to turn into the millennial lib sort of default culture of, for instance, American Dharma or the kind of alternative health food stuff, right? I live out kind of in the sticks. All my food's organic. I drive an old truck, that kind of shit, right? Like, so like whatever the old hippie, these are labels. It's bullshit, but you get the idea, right? I'm trying to create more space within those communities, within those cultures, right? And so there's definitely like a political component of that, but and whether you think that's ultimately that type of the political shift is my primary motivation or not, I wouldn't say that it is in my own self understanding, but I'm trying to sort of increase the widen the possibilities and allow more sort of cultural, ethical, and ideological freedom within all these different things that I'm involved in. To me, that feels much more impactful than trying to worry about like, how do I intervene on this cycle of discourse on these national and international level politics? Like, I don't know, I can't really do much about that, right? But I can exert a lot of weight at this institution that I'm plugged into, this institution that I'm plugged into, or whatever, whatever I'm doing over the next 1, 5, 20 years of my life. That's more how I'm approaching it.
I think that makes total sense. Like I'm there with you. I think you know that. Like I'm out in the sticks, like very rural, like really rural. Like I think it would surprise a lot of you how rural it is. But it's just like I totally agree. It is hard for me. I struggle. I struggle with interfacing with, because it is culturally different. But I have adjusted and acclimated in the last 5 years. But it is different. It was a culture shock, like no question about it. So I don't know, but I agree. I think like it's about being like open minded and like engaging with ideas and not so preconceptually, not being like so bound. I hate, like, boundaries are good. Obviously, we've talked about this so many times. Like Saturn, Banah, okay, great. Boundaries are great. Where it goes wrong is where it's in confinement, especially of your mind. I'm not like saying sicko shit or anything. I'm not talking like libertarians or anything. I'm just saying like, why do like why is there so much labels around things that are simply ideas? Like and I think one of the worst actors in the last 5 years has been parapolitical Twitter, and sort of like the mystification of not just occult text, but definitely that 100%. It's positioning everything as transgressive, when a lot of like Kabbalah is not transgressive. Like let's be honest. Like most Kabbalah is not, especially speculative Kabbalah, the way that we talk about it is really not transgressive. It was perhaps transgressive that we discussed it at all. That's what I found transgressive, but not in and of itself. So I think that they both make everything to be transgressive, but then also they kind of say, "Oh, it's evil." So I think everybody jumped on that, and I think that that is part of like our aeon. Is like we are living in this it's very oceanic. It's very like Ocean Amara, Ocean Amaya, maybe. So maybe both, maybe at the same time, maybe neither nor. Who knows? Anyways, Joshua and then Mike.
Either or, neither nor. It's nice to be here, guys. Thanks so much for hosting, Jen. and it's good to hear your voice, Solar. And Seth, heard your voice earlier. I had a few notes, so I'll just rattle them off real quick. So this might be more of a Solar question, but what you guys were talking about reminded me of the fourth turning. How, like, after about 80 years, the snake kind of bites its tail, and we kind of go through. It rhymes. It's not going to be exact same, but it's going to have similarities to generations before it. And I think that what we're seeing right now is a lot of wealth is being inherited by the prince, so to speak, but they're not ready to run the kingdom. They're respective kingdoms, that is, like corporations or just the wealth you inherit in a family or whatever. And so I think what we're seeing right now is a lot of instability with institutions, just because it's like getting the car but never being actually taught how to drive. So anyway, maybe Solar can expand on that. But the other thing I was thinking about is how, like, this sort of thing might be tied in with the inherent. Where does revolution fit in that, right? The fourth turning. I think it's like at that fourth turning when these certain pressures have been applied onto the society. And Niccolo Machiavelli, I think it was, wrote on this in his book, The Prince, incidentally, about how the point at which, I think Seth asked, when would people rebel, right? Well, he speculated in his book that people would not rebel until you started taking their land and their property. They would even send their children off to die before they would, they wouldn't rebel over that, but they would rebel once you started taking their land, property, and things like that. And I think there's a certain degree of sovereignty attributed to that, right? So I think it's what it amounts to is, once you take the sovereignty of those people, they have nothing left to lose at that point. So I think that's kind of maybe what we're seeing happen now. Is like we kind of have this future, the kids growing up now, they see like, well, what are we going to own? Could I even afford to have a family? Can I even find a biological female to have a family? Stuff like that crosses their mind. And so I think it kind of forces them to become more radical, by today's standards, when in fact they're really just embracing something that has been kind of proven to maybe work in a sense, like to get some results. Obviously, again, things rhyme; they're not always the same. But it reminds me of the Jacobians and how, at what point does this revolution take place, and when is it organic and when is it inorganic? So I think even though this may happen naturally over time, I think it can also be artificially created and steered in certain directions. And I think that that's what we're kind of seeing in the United States. Is it's not necessarily an organic revolution. And I think the red MAGA hats kind of are like a hint at that, because the Jacobians wore red caps, and we've kind of discussed that before. Even like from an alchemical perspective. But the one last point I wanted to bring up was Trump himself is a very polarizing figure. His name was even changed to be Trump. It wasn't originally Trump. So I think the symbolism of his name is that much more important when it's actually been contrived. And so where do we hear Trump? We talk about the major and minor arcana all the time and the Trumps. So, which Trump card is Trump? I maybe argue the Emperor, perhaps, something like that. But it makes me wonder then, because that Tower card shows like a Pope figure, which is the church, and like a king figure, which is like the government, right? And so they're the ones falling out of that tower once it's been struck by the lightning. And so I think that I don't know, not real sure who I can attribute this to in terms of philosophy or whatever, but I think there's like a tripod where you got like the mob, the church, and the state. And, when the two gang up on the other, the stool becomes unstable, so to speak, right? And so I always think of that with the Tower card. And looking at these figures, you could maybe say, okay, so maybe in this case, Trump is that ascendant king, right, in his tower, so to speak, Trump Tower, if you will. But then that downfall comes, and I think it might be related to when religion and government ride in the same Merkaba, if you will, or the same Ford F-150. They get in trouble, you know. Anyway, I didn't want to talk too much, but thanks for letting me weave on those topics.
I'll just be really, really quick. We don't, at least this is for me. You guys can all do what you will, as I always say. But for me, I'm not following the Kalki. I'm not following the Mahdi. I'm not following any warlords. I'm not, I'm not about it. So for me, I'm choosing to believe that the foundations are stable because my foundations are also your own mind. And I'm choosing to practice Dharma, and I'm choosing to be clear pilled and not, I reject black pilling in all its forms because I think the sort of demoralization culture is very real, and I think it's very pervasive. Yeah, Solar, sorry about that. Please go ahead.
No. I was just kind of. I was thinking about this the tripod, right? And you had mentioned Machiavelli earlier. Um, and there's kind of this weird thing, right? Because there's I'm trying to avoid some like kind of weird like phallic joke, but we've sort of grown a new limb, right? Which is that none of those thinkers could even imagine the extent to which like corporations would exist, right? Like it's not as though they hadn't like sort of innovated the idea of like a sort of basic like corporate structure, corporate charter as like a legal instrument, right? um but that it's one thing to have the idea of a corporation. It's another thing to have corporations like Amazon and Walmart and where I was today, Costco wholesale, Costco nationalism, um play such an overwhelming role in the lives of people. And again, it's yes, it's purely economic, but in terms of like the extent to which like specific corporate entities are sort of load bearing elements in keeping people alive, fed, healthy, it's remarkable, right? They are truly their own like leg of the chair, right? And it's important because they're governed in such a way that they are not bound to the interests of anyone other than their shareholders, or if they're privately held, they can kind of do whatever they want. Most of the major ones are public. And that's actually kind of relevant, right? Because like I think one of the appeals at the end of the day of whether it's we're talking about the particularities of the sort of American Christian nationalist thing that's trying to get off the ground, is we're trying to rectify the fact that that quote unquote capitalism, basically like economics, is sort of value neutral, right? There's no moral character to any of like the economic like system in and of itself, right? And increasingly there's no ethical or moral imperative that governs or motivates the state, right? We live in secular states. We participate in a sort of secular like amoral economy, right? So there's no room for any sort of like external moral or ethical concerns to intervene on decisions that are being made, right? We don't really have any like real basis for that other than like, oh, this feels like something we should do. We're sort of zombie Christian in our application of that to some degree. So I think that like, I don't know, like perhaps it's better that the state continue to erode because people will look less and less to a secular state that doesn't understand itself as having any basis to provide social welfare for people and to solve these kinds of social questions. And the problem will fall back onto the church, or again, like in a theoretical sense, like, but just social institutions, civil society, religious institutions, and other sort of fraternal organizations, right, will take on like more of that role that as it used to be, right, before the state subsumed all of its sort of welfare functions in the early part of the 20th century. I don't know though, like it's really complicated in how that goes. And I even though I think that public morality is always a disaster, basically, historically and like theoretically, right? I am very much not a Christian nationalist, spoiler alert. I completely understand the thinking as a desperate attempt to sort of heal the wound rent by like late modernity. There are problems there. There are deficiencies there. I get it.
No, I totally agree. Everything is a paradox. That's the problem. Is like we don't. it's like you said, we can't be over reliant on the theories because the theories don't accommodate for right now and like where we're at technologically, culturally, globally, economically. They don't really account for any of that because they couldn't. How could they have known unless they were like the great seers of the world? That's why metaphysics is really important because metaphysics can actually, I think, provide. This is my opinion, but I think that metaphysics is actually it provides ways to solve problems that perhaps an over reliance on mimetic magic has caused. It's just like we were talking about. Like, is the timeline like kind of fake? Yeah, it can be, doesn't have to be. It's about our choice, right? Everything's a choice. But I also think it's like you can over rely on aesthetics. You can have aesthetic with no meaning. If the meaning is not carried forward, like with the logos, then it loses potency. This is like Tantra 101. The bija cannot carry forward because the bija in itself is in deficiency, like Solar said. So it's I think it's just like there is no such thing in my opinion as a secular state. I think it should just be a wisdom science state. You want my opinion? I think it should be a magiocracy. Yeah, Mike, please go ahead.
Okay, I don't even know where to start because everyone said so many things that I want to comment on. I also don't have a paper, so I have no idea if I'm going to remember everything, but I'm going to try my best. But Jen, with what you just said, I don't want to get too deep into like some of my like crazy theories about how the reality operates, but I some things are kind of, it's not that they're not real, but some things are like I witness synchronicity sometimes that are like it's not possible that I think when people think of synchronicities, generally, it's like you're just crossing something at the right time, like, or you're just noticing something. But I think there's like another level of synchronicity, which is even more, I don't even know how to explain it. But like, for instance, like I've seen clouds before, and this was during certain moments, like in my life, like where clouds were just, I don't, and this is not all the time, but this was just like clouds were just like very specific shapes. Like I wasn't just being crazy and like seeing something that wasn't there. It was like what the fuck is going on right now? And this has only happened like in a few instances in my life, not like, and there was more to the story, but it's like everything is not, there's aspects to reality that we just do not understand, and there's things that are like purely symbolic sometimes, and there's things that are almost like meant to like give us information or like guide us in certain ways, and they're almost, you could argue, are not real. And but I just, that's what I'll say about that. But I wanted to say a lot of things about what Josh was talking about, because I was talking about the fourth turning too, but I didn't say it by name, and the Saculum, and we're talking about the Leviathan, and like when is the Leviathan coming? We all know it's like coming soon, but it's it's happening very slowly. I feel like everyone's been predicting the end of the world for a long time now, and everyone's getting a little bit impatient. Um, and Neil Howe too has predicted when that will happen. And Neil Howe has said we've been in the fourth turning now since, for actually I don't know the exact date, but he we've been in the fourth turning for a while according to his estimate. And I've personally done some research on the saculum, and Jen, like before I even entered the Grey Lodge and stuff, I think you might have remembered me saying how there was someone stole my research, and I was getting really upset, and I wasn't like knowing what to do, because I was like trying to gain credit for it, and I was posting it publicly because I don't know how else to like gain ownership over something, but I was just naive because I didn't like flesh it out enough, and now it just became someone's like trying to like compete with me on my own research. But the research I did was on the saculum, and without like going into like too much depth about what it's about, I was able to kind of like figure out a little bit more, like take it like a step further from what Neil Howe discovered, just like breaking up into like four different archetypes. And I'm not going to say like any more, but just talking about like where the Leviathan is, and like talking about also what Joshua was saying about like controlling the energy and kind of like intercepting it, or like artificially um like ending it, or ending the cycle at a certain point, or like trying to manipulate it. I don't think that kind of like strategic operations are happening, honestly, just because I don't think the people in power are like remotely aware of these things, like in terms of like I don't uh, like there a lot of people in politics are aware of like Neil Howe's The Fourth Turning and the Saculum, but I don't but not much else research and work has gone um past what Neil Howe has produced. Like it kind of just ends at him, which is kind of odd actually, because the fourth turning is such like a powerful concept, and not really many other people have been able to like um build off of it. And I think it's just because it's i- it's so like dense, like with like history, and he's been studying these subjects for so long and has such a um like a weathered career, and also it's just not like an easy subject uh to talk about and like convince people of. Um but there are like different parts in the cycle where different types, and in a more smaller segment than four different large segments, like there's different segments where the energy just kind of stabilizes, and it makes revolution very unlikely. But there's like a part in the cycle that's before the end of the cycle, where sometimes revolutions can happen there, and then it cuts the cycle short, and that's what happened with the Civil War, where or no, was it the Civil War? It was yeah, I think it was the Civil War, because African Americans were trying to get they were trying to get rights, and they were denied rights, and then the Civil War, I think that's like roughly how it began. And then it got cut short there. And then it was like 20 years shorter than it should have been. But typically it happens like at the end of the cycle. And what we've seen there is with like large wars, like World War II, um, and then World War One, globally. I'm losing my train of thought now, but I just wanted to comment on that. And I honestly feel like an asshole saying I can't talk I like because I want to talk about the research so much more, but I'm honestly not worried about anyone here like stealing it, but I don't want to. I feel so stupid for talking about it before and getting it stolen. And I'm like trying to be like low key about it without, well, also like mentioning it. And I haven't like pushed it for a while, so I kind of just like until I like really like flesh it out and like build out, I can't talk about any more than that. But that's it.
No, thanks, Mike. You said a lot of really interesting things. Yeah, I'll be really fast, I promise. And I know I said I wasn't going to do speculative, but I'm going to do speculative for 1 second. So, speculative Kalachakra. Simply talking about the fourth turning means we're in the fifth turning because we're aware of it. We're in perception. So, we're really in the fifth turning. The wheel's always spinning. It's non dual. Yeah, we live in a non dual world. The clouds do have messages. How literal do you take it? Do you take it like as meaningful? Do you make a religion around it? Do you build a klipa around it? Simple Kabbalistic questions. Like that's the nature of reality. It's the nature of your own mind. That's what I think. I don't know. Solar, please go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, I don't have something more substantive to contribute. I was just gonna say to Mike, man, I hope that you're able to find a platform that gives you enough security to where you feel like you can post without stuff being lifted. Like I don't want to say like I hope you start a Substack or something like that, but because I know theoretically like even research posts or content posted to social media is enforceable in terms of copyright law, but like no one wants to go through that. Like perhaps Substack feels a little more solid. It's easier to, sort of compile copyright claims, if you have to go through that process of like filing for takedowns and stuff like that. But yeah, just I hope that you're able to find an outlet for that because I'd be interested in seeing your work on this specifically, but also just generally, that's some bullshit. And it's something I think we all struggle with in different ways. So I hope you find something that works for you.
Yeah, I have to say, Mike, that I completely empathize with that situation. There is someone who's running around doing like basically they're saying that their account is Star Nuria, and they're saying that they're like the scion of the Aeon of the Daughter. Like so they stole. It's like it's okay. Yes, it's a bit when I do it. okay, speculatively, but I may or may not believe it, okay, unconfirmed. But it's not cool that they do it so blatantly, right? Like, you didn't know who the fuck Nuria is until I said the name. Like, like, yeah, you can think my shit is cool, but like, go read Frater Chad and do your own Kabbalah. John, what is up, my Naga? Haven't seen you in ages. Thank you for coming. Appreciate you. I'm bringing you up. And then Joshua, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. Uh, Actually, it's in response to what you just said about the fifth turning, and how we think we're in the fourth, but we're in the fifth. And it reminded me of a scientific phenomena known as the Doppler effect, where as something's approaching you, you may not really hear it, and as it passes you, of course, you do hear it. But then after it leaves, the way it sounds change, and so it's a matter of perception, right? And so maybe how we perceive the ages as they roll by is somehow similar. Maybe there's a certain momentum that kind of persists as the new is added, on top of the old, just like strata of Earth. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Everything that you said is true. It's like it's Aeon of the Daughter shit, dude. It's like wield the heatless fire. Like Solar's doing Tumo, okay? So like he's learning fundamentally how to tame. I don't know if it's heatless, but it's the essence of heatless fire, we'll say. So it's not just Dzogchen though. I just want to point out that like the inner physical level is just one layer. Maybe it's a profound level. Maybe it transcends various densities. Yes, various like the three kayas, three body problem, as we say. Yes, it does, but it's still only one level. So there's other ways to understand what that is. There's other ways to build heatless fire. I think it's in your mind. I'm a more of a deity yoga person, but there's other ways. And it doesn't mean we're middle path, right? So there was a joke about like the Christian guys who are like, oh yeah, don't, whatever. And then there's the people who are like, yeah, like hedonists. Like it's not, it's like there's actually like normalcy in between those two. Like you can just be normal. That is like a thing. Outwardly present, at least. You can be weird. We're all weird. But you wanna just be kind of normal. Yeah, Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, quickly, I just wanted to clarify. So my emphasis is on the physical aspect of like heat generation and energy manipulation in Tumo, specifically because I'm trying to resolve a physiological problem and sort of danger that I've encountered in the meditation, right? So, and I'm not like, well, I don't have to fucking apologize for doing Tumo or anything, but I did want to clarify that like my practice has taken a detour out of physical necessity to that, right? Because I'm just having a particular issue at a certain stage. I want to proceed, safely, I guess. I would like to continue to sit without dying. um I did want to say though, like I know it's kind of a stupid general anxiety, man, but I get a little nervous thinking about the sort of like long-term future of American Dharma, because America is such a powerful mystical engine of synthesis and sort of rebirth, in a way that's profound and incredible, right? Like we will take something, strip it down, and come up with eight new versions of it. That we just allow things to proliferate, like, right? Like that's we have that like sort of folk religious we're very pro cult culture, right? And that's very cool, like in general, right? Like we took all of these sort of Eastern and like sort of Oriental and Hermetic influences that were coming primarily from and through England at the end of the 19th century, and we allowed for the full flourishing of like the quote unquote New Age stuff, right? Just as like a prominent example, right? Like even though that stuff's kind of Anglo, it really flourished, like and exploded here in the States, right? But with Dharma specifically, man, it's like that American force for sort of synthesis and multiplicity and sort of remixing is so strong. I worry about the sort of the depth of the core seeds that are there. I worry about the forces of sort of synthesis overwhelming the sort of pure traditional aspects of the transmission, right? And this isn't I'm not I'm not throwing aspersions on any sort of new variant of Dharma, right? But for me, it's like, okay, especially like after we have this like great boomer die off, which is also going to be a funding issue, right? Like, how many Tibetans are actually in America, right? Like a lot, but also not that many, right? Like, how strong are the like third, fourth, fifth generation Japanese American communities that are keeping like particular like strains of Buddhist practice like alive? And like, are those going to be able to actually like pivot to begin to appeal to like, you know, the whatever multiracial 21st century American practitioner, you know, things like that, right? I don't want everything to just turn into uh fucking Mount Shasta like new age stuff. And I worry about like actual traditional Buddhist institutions and lineages and sort of chains of transmission staying above water, I guess. I don't know.
Okay, so two really great points. First, I was commending you for Tumo practice. Like I legit, like regardless of your reasons, I think it's great. I wasn't trying to tease you too much. I was just saying that that's a profound level, right? Like that's a profound level to sort of interact with that concept of heatless fire. There's other profound levels. That's all I was trying to say. Is that there are multiple levels to that, and so it doesn't just because that's one way. Yes, I agree. That's a great way. It's just that that's one way. So not everyone maybe will be able to access that. So that goes into your next point. Like, what is American Dharma? American Dharma is not necessarily Asian Dharma, and it doesn't have to be. And this is something that I just spoke about with the guy from IG. It's like they recognize like the Tibetans. They have a lot of monasteries in Colorado. So I'm going to repeat the same story because it's a really good story. And so I apologize if anyone listens to that episode. There's several major Tibetan monasteries of all 4 or 5 schools. There's actually a Shangpa one as well. Anyways, they do the song offering to the 3 mountain goddesses. 3 mountain goddesses is a very important deities, worldly deities, long life deities. There's actually 5, but it's usually 3 that are worshipped specifically, but they actually are tied to a specific mountain. So Tibetans in Colorado recognize these 3 sisters. That's what they're called. The Native American name was like 3 sisters, so they call it 3 sisters in English. Basically, they recognize the same thing. Are they the same Yakshinis? No, not one to one. But are they? Yes. So they do the song offering to the 3 sisters, just like they would do in Tibet. So, yeah, I agree that everything in Dharma will be American Dharma. Well, yeah, there's gonna be outer temple, like you know this. There's outer temple, inner temple, secret temple, and like there's different kinds of transmissions. I'm not saying like we should go with everyone's unverified personal gnosis, whatever, but I think that there is something interesting. Like it doesn't necessarily because we have the connections. Like the transmission is here. If you understand that at the more secret layer, just because the person isn't like having 20 kids and they're not all like Hyperboreans like me, like whatever, it doesn't matter because they're physically here. So the transmission is physically here. It's tied to the land. It's even us just acknowledging the ideas right now. I'm not saying it's like any kind of transmission or lineage, but I'm saying the seeds are there. And the seeds can always be reopened. That is sort of the point. Is like we have the sutra text. 84,000, that website has like all those tantras and all those sutras. That's an incredible that's American Dharma. People can read that. You can read any Pranaparamita Sutra and and find bijas if you know the formulation. Now I know the formulation. I'm not some great master. I took Sanskrit for 3 years. It's not like not like, oh wow, great job. No, it's just that once you figured it out, like why would you forget? And I'm smart, so that's also that. But yes, I think both things. It's like you need both things. So, anyways, I'm sorry, Joshua, Seth, and then Mike.
I just wanted to point out the synchronicity of the Doppler effect that occurred while you were speaking. So that it would be a good example of it. It sounded like a redneck in a pickup truck or something. But anyway, also the comment about disassembling and assembling, I think was kind of in terms of philosophy and ideas and religious systems. But what it reminded me of was my understanding of Aquarius as a personality trait. They're curious about electronics, if you will, and maybe they desire to disassemble the electronic device and then reassemble it. And so I think that reminds me of also the solve coagula axiom, to dissolve and reassemble. And I think that's maybe a hallmark of the Aquarian age, is that in this turning, whatever it is, whichever number of turning it is, in this turning, we have things now like the Kabbalah, which kind of pull the curtain back on a lot of different things, a lot of different systems. And so we can kind of take it apart and put it back together again, kind of maybe understand it a little bit better than in maybe some ages past, where they didn't have the ability to explore anything outside their own town, maybe, as much, regardless of the country they were in. So I just wanted to point that out, is that I think we live in a time of synthesis that is kind of characterized by that, dissolution and condensation.
100%. 100%. It doesn't matter what form the Dharma takes. Dharma says this about itself. Can transmute. It's like a dragon. It's like a true Naga. Can shed its skin. Can look dead. Can look like a seed. Like all the Japanese sutras, they're all obsessed with lotus gardens. Well, that's like the story of a lotus. A lotus can sit in the mud for like 10, 50 years sometimes. And then it waits for the rain and waits for it to come back. So it can like root itself, and then it can bloom again. That's why plants make such a great metaphor for both Dharma and Kabbalah. Because it's a wonder of God, like to see, like, whether you believe in God or not, or whether you take refuge in God or not, I'm just saying it is a splendor. So it is one way to think about it. And obviously Dharma thinks about it as like the pinnacle of Maya, because it's impermanent, but it is beautiful at its apex. Okay, sorry. Yes, Seth, go ahead.
Well, gentlemen, I unfortunately must leave you as you're hitting your stride, but very interesting things to consider. Um, Interesting phrase, Jin, to take refuge in God, you know. I too sought refuge in God. But I will see y'all gentlemen later. Next week, God willing. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Naga. Appreciate you. Everybody, that was Bibliomancer Seth. Oh shit, I didn't even do our fuck. I'll do it at the end. I'll plug our Grey Lodge website and everything. But no, that was a great show. Legit. I had a lot of fun. We did talk about some weird things that I really didn't expect, but I guess it kind of works out, doesn't it, in a way. I think that's why I call it Mountain God, because I was like, there's no better way to orient yourself, in a way. Like I always talk about this, like the Jinshan, like the Gold Mountain, but it's like Mount Meru, right? Like I'm just using a metaphor. I'm using like a John Carpenter movie, but I'm talking about Dharma. I don't know. Surprise if you didn't know that. I'm really talking about Mount Meru. So that's the same concept. So I think that sort of touches on everything we've talked about. It's like a syncretic map. Like that's what America is. It's a patchwork of states. Things are always going to be imperfect. That is just a given. It's just like part of the kernel ground design, you could say. And we can improvise, we can be flexible, and we can remake where we can remake. And sometimes you do have to destroy a little. Just saying. It's okay. Like I'm saying it's okay. Maybe I'm not like the, chief millennial, but I think it's okay. Like I felt very contained. Like I've always been a very contained person. I know I said I was a born baddie, but actually that's not really quite true. It's a little true, but it's also not quite true, because I'm actually pretty conservative outwardly. And so, and inwardly, I mean, I'm not saying I'm like wild inside, but yeah, I'm a little wild inside. But I'm just saying that I think that I let myself be contained because I felt like I had to stay within ideological frameworks that people were comfortable with. And what I've discovered in doing the spaces and doing the show is that actually I'm more comfortable going outside of it, because then I can just go and do my own thing, like in my own mind. I don't have to worry about like other people's approval of the things that I think about or talk about. So in some ways, it's been like it's been liberatory in a way, just simply because I feel free to think about and talk about the things that we do. So I think wisdom science, us discussing wisdom science, I think that plants a seed. I think that was my whole point. I think that is the Dharma. I don't think it necessarily has to take Asian lineage form or an Indian form, but I think it will be informed by those things. I think that the institutional Dharma will either reform itself or I'm talking about reform with a hyphen, or it will sort of fade away with the boomers. But I think it's up to them, and I think they'll have to really decide like which ways to move forward. Like I don't think that there are any great options necessarily. Like, yeah, teapot is what it is, Vipassana is what it is, all of that shit that I don't even like really. But I'm just saying that it will have to make up its own decisions at an institutional level. But as an individual practitioner, I think we have sovereignty over the way we engage. Okay, yeah, sorry. Joshua, please go ahead, and then Solar.
Yes, thank you. I'll be brief. Actually, one of the comments is for Solar. When you guys were talking about the heatless flame, I was reminded of chemistry class where we were taught that if your flame was blue, it was actually a cold flame. So, although it's still a flame, of course, it's much, much cooler than the red part of the flame or the clear part of the flame, which is intensely hot or white hot, Um, but that makes me think of the red and blue light spectrum too. So it's like that's as far, uh, that's the weakest flame you can have right before it like ceases to be a flame, I guess. Also, was thinking of how electricity could kind of satisfy that definition of heatless fire. Because it's not until it arcs that it causes the heat and fire, and otherwise, if it's insulated, it's subdued. And that's, of course, exactly how our nerves operate. So the insight I kind of got from what you were talking about was just maybe understanding the heatless fire is maybe some relationship between heat and electricity, kind of like an engine, how it operates. But that includes magnetism, I think, when it's used in an engine. So maybe there's some magnetic stuff going on there. I don't know. Um, and then my last question, I wanted to revisit that Trump Arcana thing. Was there a particular Sephiroth or path that maybe comes to mind? And the reason I suggest that is because I see, like what he's trying to do with peace agreements and stuff. And it's like he's trying to cobble together, alliances and peace agreements and stuff where they're not necessarily, they're kind of unnatural and it almost seems kind of forced. And it reminds me of that part in scripture with the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, how there's the tower with the head of gold, arms of silver, belly of bronze, legs of iron, and then the feet are clay and iron mixed together. So that's like partly strong, but also brittle. And so I kind of imagine like we're moving into that tower moment. I feel like that's kind of represented by something like that in scripture. Anyway, I was just curious if we could plot that on the tree somewhere, just for some insight, maybe. Thank you.
Well, I would say that it's like a very Mithraic action to form a treaty, forms and synthesis. It's very Tipheratic, in my opinion. So obviously, a lawyer is best placed at Hesed, although a lawyer can also be placed at Gevurah. It depends, right? So there is a kind of way to make the treaty between those two polarities. So I mean, that's what I think. I'll let Solar go because I know he's probably got some things. Okay, Solar, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick little collection of things. I'm gonna refrain on commenting on the Tumo with the colors and the electricity and magnetism because I'm still learning. I'm very new to the practice. I'm not in a position to certainly like teach or really even speak on it meaningfully. Also, like there's a theoretical aspect to this. There's very rich, like you can get into the weeds, but it really is a practice at the end of the day. And the longer I do a lot of these things, the more almost like wary I am of just like endless yapping. It doesn't really mean anything if you haven't actually done it, if you haven't really like felt how these things are, and you realize that all these words, all these like strings are really profoundly imperfect approximations of something that you're trying to capture that was experienced. So anyway, I just like, yeah, ask me in 6 months. If I haven't blown my heart up or whatever doing it. Yeah, no. So as an example though of what I the main thing I want to say, I think there's we're going to be entering an age, even more so, right? Both with respect to American Dharma specifically, and just kind of I think like in general, where there's a profound need for people who have gone in depth, familiarizing themselves with like ritual grammars, ritual languages, like people who are can think on their toes and dynamically apply maybe more traditional frameworks into new contexts. So for example, and one you might not expect, I still am close with this group of, I guess you'd call them like Wignat pagan guys, out here in the Midwest. What makes this particular group, I mean, it's just like a dozen dudes or so, interesting is that the leader was a member of, I'm not going to say which one, but I mean, you can probably guess, a particular initiatic group, the left hand path group, for like a decade, right? And so he learned, he soaked up everything that he needed to know, and then he took that to a kind of boilerplate acid true context, right? But he's able to do all kinds of really interesting things with that, and he has to be able to like make connections, to be able to support the sort of initiatic and magical development of other people, because he has that background and training and that kind of broader perspective, right? Like on its own, reconstructionist, like Germanic paganism, Asatru, whatever. Like again, no shade to like AFA guys and people doing that, but like I think it's extremely limited as an actual like practice, right? I've been very vocal in my criticisms of that and what I perceive to be the limitations of that, right? But 10 years of intense initiatic training, now all of a sudden a lot of things are open to you, and that's also like my approach to like dharma too. Not that I have any particular ambitions to do anything with that. I'm just a practitioner trying to work out my own liberation and go from there, right? But I do think though that there's like tremendous potential for people who take that stuff really seriously, who not just like obtain transmissions but really go deep into like training, expand their capacities, right, to then bring that out into maybe like a wider market, if you want to say it that way, right? And reach people who might not be interested in the more traditional like dharmic path or this or that, right? But again, they've studied the tantras, they are actually accomplished and realized meditators, things like that, right? Like they have enough of a background to actually take someone beyond the like bullshit like health and wellness or whatever, right? And that's something that I hope continues to happen and happens more frequently, right? As people put themselves in positions to be able to innovate genuine, like an American Dharma, if you will. I don't know.
I appreciate that you're hopeful. So I'll say that. I'm taking more of the Nagapa approach. I think everyone's a village sorcerer until they're not. And then I think your orientation will change. Like that's just my experience. So I think that everybody will sort of approach Dharma in a way, but it's like with any religion. I'm not like I joke that I'm a Dharma supremacist, and I am, because I think Dharma contains the path in its in its deepest fullness, and I think it contains the truth, like the primordial truth. But I'm not necessarily married to the form in and of itself, simply because I have been around Vajrayana for a long time, and I just know that sometimes people do find it alienating. And I'm not saying I'm like out to make like some ecumenical version or like libtard like watered down version. I'm definitely not. What I'm saying is I appreciate the sort of violence or ferocity of tantra for what it is. But I also know like my own limitations. But I also know like where like I'm good at certain sadhanas, so I know that I can work through certain things. I'm not saying 100% it's perfect. I'm just saying that I can produce a degree of effect, both on myself and just maybe my immediate surrounding. So for me, I just take it like everybody can access that. That's what Dharma even says. It says that everybody can access that whether you choose to believe that or not, I'm not saying for anyone, I'm saying for just general, anyone listening back. It's like, like I'm not saying it can take whatever form you want. I'm saying there is a primordial truth that becomes more obvious the deeper you get into wisdom science. I think that's what makes it primordial rather than traditional. Like, I think you can take the tradition, practice it, but that doesn't even mean you'll be great at it. I've spoken with a lot of magicians now, and like there's clearly people who get it, and then there's clearly people who never had higher consciousness sort of realizations at all. It's like, you've been doing magic for 30 years. Like, I'm not criticizing those people. I'm just saying that you have to show like you've like made a degree of accomplishment. I think you have to be able to articulate things in like a broader way. It can't just be like super narrow focus. Like, you should be able to. I think that, well, I'm a millennial, so maybe I just think like this, but I think the flexibility is really paramount. And I think people who have higher conscious experiences are more flexible. That's just my perspective and experience, but maybe that's incorrect. Okay, Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, just to like piggyback on that, like all I'm saying is because I fantasize about like hypothetical things sometimes, right? So like I have like stupid phrases will come into my head like hillbilly American hillbilly shugendo, so just shit like that, right? Um, and it's like, but again, the sort of Western grab bag occultist like witch person, practitioner. There's like, again, there's like millions of those people, right? God bless them. Imagine if you could get into those people's hands, contact with some of the sort of like foundational ideas. And again, I don't want to be super narrow of just like of Dharma, but like of a serious engagement with the nature of mind that would allow, like, I'm not saying you have to drop your Western practice and go be a Buddhist, right, or something like that, but to incorporate what I would just say more serious and more rigorous like training and examination of like the nature of of self, quote unquote, of mind, etc. If you could get that into more people's Western magical practices, like that is like the necessary like fucking rocket booster to make a lot of things happen for a lot more people, right? Like you're never gonna get that American Shugendo without like a little bit of like kind of foundation in like you can't just kind of take the sort of messy, incomplete default assumption of like Western soul complex, take that for granted basically from like a Christian perspective, or like again the sort of vague notion of like self, soul, whatever, and just go from there. Like you are going to be so held back in terms of your practice if you are stuck there and you never like interrogate that and like work with that. At least in my experience, I feel pretty strongly about that. And so that's where I mean, like, it's not that I'm like turning into fucking like Nietzsche and like trying to like get everyone to practice and believe exactly what I do. Not at all. But it's more like there are certain things that I see as really, really powerful seeds or like really powerful keys that unlock all types of different practice, right? And I want to find a way to like to just like get some more of that out there. It's more where I'm coming from. And frankly, like non-dual like ways of understanding and meditation and things like that are those things for me that I found in my limited experience.
I agree with all that. I think there's no problem with American Shugendo. Like, what is that essentially? Purification practices through the mountain god. Which mountain god? Well, maybe it's just the mountain god of place. Maybe it's just the genus loci. Maybe it's all the mountain gods. Maybe it's all the spirits of the mountain. All the, spirits of the hosts or the hosts themselves. All of them together. That's a lot of what Shinto is. That's what a lot of what the Onmyodo is. That's what a lot of like Japanese Dharma is about. It's like there's an animist strain and it's undeniable. I mean, it is the Yaksha cult, but it's not, we don't necessarily have to focus on that. But I'm just saying that I agree with you. Non-duality is the way. I think non-duality is the sort of like the key. It's the Dathic key. For me, that it makes sense. That it unlocks more aspects of wisdom science and it makes the flower just explode into splendor. Like that is the true sort of like mysticism, I would say. And I think through that, different things can be unlocked. Like Matt talks about this, like unlocking new paths of the tree, new trees themselves. I think that's what he's talking about. That's how I've always interpreted it. It's like you're unlocking one, lock, and a new thing evolves in front of you because you're rebuilding, you're rectifying, you're synthesizing the paths as you go. I think that is how I like to think of politics and sort of meta politics, like more broadly, is just like it's constantly in flux and constantly sort of reformulating itself. And I don't just mean politics, but I just mean maybe reality more broadly. Just like it's in flux. Like I'm okay to treat it like that. I know that's not for everybody. I know that's not very pragmatic sounding, but I just feel like strongly that is the same for American Dharma. It will take different turns. It will sometimes have dead ends. It will look ugly at times, and it will not always be in keeping with everything traditional. But I think the primordial truth is the primordial truth, and like there's something different. And like you talked about this, Solar, and I even talked about it on the episode. Like you saw a lot of Buddhas growing up. Like, isn't that planting the seed? Like us just talking now. Like, well, we have 10 mil. Okay, so you're going on a rocket ship to like all the way. Okay, but for the rest of us normies, we're coming back 10 million more times as fish or whatever. And well, I'm not coming back as a fish, but yeah, maybe I will. Maybe I will. Maybe a couple lifetimes. Good. It's a really good karmic cleanser. They do say that. It's a fast little. It's like a scrub. It's like a scrub rub down. Not a rub down. Anyways. But no, it's like a karmic, like you scrub the scales on the fish. That's what I was thinking of, like very Chinese, right? Like you scrub the scales off the fish. So that's what it's considered to be. It's considered to be like very karmically purifying. But I think that one of the foundational practices is Vajrasattva. I mean, that practice didn't come from anyone. That a practice was a mind transmission practice. So the primordial guru arose in one of the Mahasiddha's mind. That's where Vajrasattva comes from. The Puranas also have a story about how they came to be. It just put them in the hands of a yogi who's also considered a Mahasiddha, who's also considered an emanation of the Vajraguru. Now, whether you understand that to be Vajrasattva, Vajrakilaya, Guru Padmasambhava, Toshrang Tal, Tsongkhapa, like whomever it is. Like I don't think it's Tsongkhapa. I'm not like of that thinking, but I just think of it like that's a mind transmission. But that's like the foundational practice. That is what, if you understand that practice, it builds the temple for you. It not for you. You have to do it, but in your mind, at least the foundations, the four pillars. So, and I agree. Like talking too much about practices, I've done this in the past. Sometimes that can go really wrong, just simply because people take it wrong or that it confuses you when you go back to practice them. So that is, I think, a use and sometimes why I use Kabbalah more, because then I don't have to talk with such specificity about my own practices. Not that I'm embarrassed of them. I'm not. I like to use other frameworks. Sometimes that's also anime. It doesn't matter. It's just like I try to use other things to talk about the same things, but also contain, like, be respectful of the elements of origin. Yeah, Joshua, please go ahead.
Well, you got me thinking about when you're talking about being a fish and all that stuff. I was thinking about the when you describe somebody as being coy. I was like, I wonder if that's got any fish attributions. But anyway, the mountain god discussion reminded me of something from scripture in the Bible. Many times it mentions high places, and they would what they would do is people that had their folk gods or whatever, they would have groves of trees, which this might be more like ancestor worship as well to some degree. But apparently they would bury their dead in the tree groves, and the belief, well, somewhat practical belief, was supported by the fact that you could then visit the spirits of your ancestors and that were inhabiting the trees. And so I guess this is where the tradition of knocking on the door kind of comes from, is because you would knock on the tree, I guess, to summon the spirit. But what's odd about that to me is how even in more
contemporary stories about ghosts, there are these types of spirits known as rapping spirits or knocking spirits, where they like, that's how they communicate or whatever, when it's legitimate, of course, and not a farce. But at any rate, that's just something that kind of came to my mind, was this concept of groves on top of the mountains, and then their relationship with spirits, and ancestors.
I'll just go really quick, Solar. So we've talked about this, Joshua, a million times, like Matrika's 7 to 8 star goddesses, the primordial star goddesses, um, whatever, Big Dipper, Little Dipper, depends. Mario talks about this, but like Buddhism also, like directly, Tantra itself directly addresses this. So that's just the primordial consort. Yeah, she appears as 7 or 8, and she appears as like an old, like, I don't know, like Barbello figure, but she's not. She's actually like, she has the choice. That's how we would describe it. She has the choice to rise up again in the tree. She might give birth to the Klippas. She might dwell in the deepest pit. But she has the choice, and she actually has multiple forms that she can climb up. That's what we would say. That's how a tantric would answer. So I don't know. Solar, go ahead, please.
Yeah. Just a quick note on that. So like any good National Socialist, I keep up with my weekly Torah study, and so last week's Parshas Lech Lecha, so like 4 or 5 times. So it's the wanderings of Abram, right? He's not yet Abraham, right? But he's wandering around when he goes to Mitzrayim and does the whole bit with his sister wife and all that fun stuff, right? But so 3 or 4 times in the parsha, there's this emphasis where he'll go to a settlement, and or like near a settlement, he'll travel to or through an existing city or town, and it'll mention there's a grove in one of them, or two of them specifically, right? But so there will be a place of worship, right? And this is sort of obviously, pre-Abrahamic, right? Because we're literally in the sort of mythology of Abraham, right? So everyone's kind of some kind of pagan ancestor worshiping. We don't really have a lot of details on like Near Eastern religious practice, other than like what's preserved in the Ugaritic texts and stuff like that. But yeah, so there are these sacred grove sites where they're doing ancestor worship, and there's always this emphasis that Abraham, he avoids them. He'll go outside of town, he'll go to the other the other side of the street, so to speak, and he'll build an altar and usually carry out a sacrifice. Sometimes it specifies only that he built the altar, other times it'll specify that he only makes a sacrifice, but right, so there's this maintenance of separation, right? And of course you could say, okay, well, that's Abraham being Abraham, that's, Jews be Jewing, all that stuff, right? But I do think there's a sort of like cosmic distinction you can make here, right? So on one hand, you have, and again, I'm certainly not trying to again cast aspersions on ancestor veneration or any of that per se. I do have sympathies for historical and reconstructionist practices, even if I don't engage in them myself. But on one hand, the sacred grove site, the ancestor burial mound site, is sort of an attachment to what was, is, and shall be, the cyclical kind of model, right? There's not a particularly like transcendence in that, right? Like there can be like an elevation, there's definitely a sense of the sacred, right? There's sacred time, the sacred wheel, right, that keeps turning in that. But the individual who practices that way is conceptually, inserting themselves into that cycle, right? And then I think in maybe more of a Gnostic reading of this like Parsha and of the Bible, which again I'm not personally invested in. I don't give a shit, but you can read it this way, right? In contrast, you have someone like Abraham who's saying, no, 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 like I'm stepping out of the sort of cosmic, eternal, like recurrent cycle over here that's based on ancestor worship and that, right? And I am going to set myself up like aiming at transcendence, aiming at ejection, right? Like exit of the system, right? Now, obviously, like to get there in terms of actual Jewish theology, you're not going to get that until the flowering of the Kabbalah many, many, many centuries later. So, take what you can get. But I do think there's like an interesting juxtaposition there. And I think like we have to, as like individual practitioners, kind of like orient ourselves. Like, do we want to? It's not necessarily binary. It's not like one or the other. It's not that you can't engage in animistic practices, in even like ancestor recognition, veneration, engagement with that, right? But like, am I aiming for transcendence and ejection, or the super personal, or am I aimed at kind of like maximizing myself within the sort of energetic cosmic flow of the yeah of that sort of eternal time, right? The wheel. I don't know. It's an interesting way to think about it for me anyway.
No, I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. I think I like I have less patience. I think you all know this. I'll be reasonable in my voice about it, but I have less patience. Like, don't we was Kang? I'm not saying if you go to any talk festival for the Dakinis, particularly for Vajrayogini or say Vajravrahi, they do ancestor offerings. It's no big deal. It's the problem is when people go way overboard with it. Like, you don't have a sock every day. Like, you just don't. That's not real world. Like, you can do offerings, you can do all the things, like there are like daily sadhanas. It's just like what is practical and pragmatic for people, and I just think people tend to get lost in the weeds. And it's like what is bringing you to higher, whether you're self actualizing in a sort of non-dual way, we'll say, although you're not really self-actualizing, but it may be a higher apotheosis, transcendence, we could call it, liberation, moksha in a way, hyperspace kingdom at least, or you're ejecting from the cube, like full Dathic resonance. You're like gone outside. Okay, peace out. Whatever it is, I think that is the point. I think that's the higher principle. It's not like reconstructing. It's not like looking at the snake mounds and being like, oh, how can we replicate one to one what these people were doing if those people even made it out? And it's not about like being crazy about it either. Like, like that's one of the problems with like alternative history is that they take themselves as almost as literally as more institutional sort of forces, and then that inherently sort of makes them klipothic. So I don't know that I think like we have the primordial way. The primordial way is like so easy. It's like it is your mantra, it is the rosary, and it is you. That's it. Wisdom, method, and your mind. I mean, that is the essence of Tantra. You want the essence of Tantra? That's the essence of Tantra. I'm not even kidding, like, and I'm not like being self-aggrandizing or anything. That is the essence. It's a hard essence of Tantra. But you have to generate bodhicitta. You have to do all those like good things. But it really, yeah, essentially, it is those three things, and it is picking up your rosary, and it is practicing, even when you don't feel like it. You think there are times I don't feel like it. There's a lot of times I don't feel like it. That's for everybody. There's a lot of times you do it and you feel great for 10 minutes. This has happened to me so many times. I feel great. Like, just like, it's not great as in like you're so high or you're energized. It's just like you just feel like kind of pristine, like at peace almost, like just very clarified in your thinking, like clear plan of action, a clear like formulation for the day. And then something will arise and you still have to deal with that. You still have to push through that. I struggle with that. Everybody does. That's not abnormal. That's just my experience. I'm not saying I'm some great, not. But I'm just saying that, yeah, that's the essence of Tantra is you have to practice it. And so even just doing that rotation on your japa, that is supposed to carry you through the day in the sense that, yes, that is a sort of repetitive action, but hopefully in your mind, you continue doing the mantra recitation in your mind throughout the day, even if it's the quiet echo in your subconscious. That's kind of what I think now. I don't know. I kind of feel like the essential ritual grammar is the most important, but I also think like yes, learning how to do puja. Yeah, like yeah, I agree. That's important. That makes sense. I know how to do it. Why would I deny it to anyone else? But I also think like we have the most basic tools like at our disposal also. Okay, Solar, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just put in really bonehead terms, right? Like, I mean, again, like one of the functions of these things is as you're going through is ultimately you're trying to sort of like loosen up, right? You're trying to sort of like make a little less like rigid the we call it reification, right? But the sort of like actual objective like reality, I, thou, like it's out there, I'm in here. This is how it is. This is what's going on, right? And like these processes, it's like, I mean, it's doing a lot, right? But it's trying to soften that, to like like I said, to keep it a little bit looser. And I guess like with a lot of the I don't know, man. Again, with a lot of the reconstructionist things, right? Like it gives you this whole framework. It gives you a whole set of priorities that like these are the things that you're supposed to care about, right? You're sort of bound to the land, you're bound to the blood, you know. And I'm not trying to counter signal blood and soil, like, you know, heaven forbid, you know, forgive me, Hitler. But it's not that. It's more that like I don't see a lot of like liberation, right? Because the those types of concerns, well, they sort of wed you to as sort of like an obligatory follow through, right? In the same way that like even and again like Jason Giorgiani, we love you, everything you say is true, please come on Threshold Saints, but like even someone like, you know, like Giorgiani, right? Like a very idiosyncratic and particular formulation of the kind of state of reality. It's very complicated. Giorgiani's got layers, right? But even still, right, there are like sort of necessary implications. Like if you kind of accept this, then you're sort of like along for the ride with certain sort of ideas, certain maybe even political commitments, things like that, right? I guess my point is like I don't see a lot of flexibility in a lot of those approaches, right? And like at even at a very like practical personal level, right? Like I see a lot of those people, there's some shock, there's some, you know, now I'm like riding a bike or on a skateboard in my head for this metaphor, right? Like something comes onto your path and you're bearing down, you know, you're inputting a tight correction, right? You're trying to hold on to the wheel, right? And that's how you fall, right? Like in a lot of these things, it's like looseness and like relaxing into the balance that you've already established is how you stay on your feet, right? I don't know. So I just mean like in practical terms, but also like theoretical terms. Like I think that like you can really judge a lot of these things by their fruit, you know?
I 100% agree. And Jason Giorgiani, you're more than welcome to come on the show. I know that I would have like them fight amongst themselves of like who to get on that episode. I would have them all, just to be clear. But I'm just saying that like that would be great. That would be fun to do a roundtable with Jason Giorgiani. Who wouldn't want to do that? I'm just saying he'll never come on because it's like what Solar was saying, and he said it in a polite and nice way. I might be less so, but if you're too rigid, of course it's going to come into friction. And I don't mean that in a weird way. I mean it in like it's a reality bending way. Like he likes Vajrayana for its aesthetics, and he doesn't like Vajrayana actually. He only likes Theravada because there is a kind of finality a little bit. I won't get into this, but there is a kind of finality a little. There's a little more eternalism in the well, we would say there was is there's a little more eternalism in the Theravada scriptures, a little bit, or at least an interpretation. And so there's a little bit more of an infinite capacity specifically in Vajrayana. But of course, Vajrayana obviously comes from Pranaparamita. So you could say that in the more esoteric kinds of Mahayana, this full liberation was possible. Of course, it's available at every sort of like Dharmakaya or like mind stream. Of course, liberation is possible, but it takes like so long. Vajrayana is just like a much faster. It's considered like the fastest vehicle. And so I think that I think that the return to land thing, like I'm a big believer in this idea of like we are connected to the land through treaty, but I'm also not unrealistic in that like I don't even live in where I was born. So like it's like can I really say, oh, like yes, I'm like blood and soil nationalist? No, wouldn't even make sense. I'm not like I'm not formed of the land that I live on, but in some ways I've had experiences of higher consciousness here. So maybe in a way, you sort of are more connected to the land in that way, and through your like daily lifestyle and practices. So I'm sympathetic to that. I'm obviously not sympathetic to the blood stuff, simply because I'm just not a theosophist or a racialist. Like I just don't think in those terms. I'm not diminishing it or like saying it's bad. I don't think that. I'm not that. I tend to think of things in more aeonic terms, and like the one thing about the return to blood and soil is that that's very aeon of the mother. That's like, and that's not me being a speculative Gnostic, but that's like me looking at like you want to talk about Hinduism or like Vedic kind of like eternalism. That's a very flawed kind of eternalism, in my opinion. It doesn't even let you really get past that second layer of reality. Like if you understand how Tantra thinks of like the Vedic gods, they're not that high up. Like I don't know. For me, I think that we should aim higher, whether we get there or not. I just think why be fixed? I don't know. When you're saying that there's all these methods to not be so fixed, to go higher, to think in higher ways, even just to think in higher ways, maybe that increases capacity. I don't know. The solar, please go ahead. Sorry about that.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it's like a solved problem, man, but I really think Evla is super solid on race, right? Like the tripart like kind of stratification, right? You have the biological layer, which obviously like the broadest, but the least important, and it tells you the least about like what a person is. Not saying it's totally irrelevant. There definitely are like maybe predispositions and certain like things in there, but it's very low level, right? Then you have cultural, which is infinitely more relevant and impactful, right? And then you have like spiritual, right? It's sort of a pyramid model, right? And so when we're talking about like men of race, like it's really, we're not talking about like skin color or anything like that. Like that might be a precondition of it, but it's really not what tells you something about the higher differentiation and the true possibility of man's the possibility of man's potential evolution, right, or future evolution, to get into Ouspensky or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I think the focus on biological race is definitely a distraction. It's a detriment. Frankly, it was only like so prominent because that's how people were thinking at the end of the 19th and early 20th century. And of course, it's much easier to legislate actual concrete policy in terms of like biological things that you can keep track of, right? In terms of heredity and things like that, where you start getting into culture and spiritual life, like those things are harder to deal with as a bureaucratic managerial state, right? So there's a reason the Third Reich didn't have a lot to say about it. They were working on that, but didn't last long enough. So anyway, but yeah, it's a total red herring and completely irrelevant in the 21st century for America, right? Like just we don't even have the racial stock to make any of those ideas actionable anyway. So you're jerking off. Yeah, I was just gonna say about just I don't want to derail with the Giorgiani thing, right? But it's like he fucks with Vajrayana a little bit, but he ultimately completely rejects the idea of the Dharmakaya as all creating sovereign, right? So he doesn't actually have like a Dharmic sort of like theory of mind. So none of this actually makes any sense, right? He has this like it's not he has this like weird intermediate layer where you have a mind stream that is conditioned and in fact can be manipulated by the like archonic Aryan UFO people, right? Because they have like control over the Bardo. They have like Bardo manipulation machines, right? So they're capable of like intercepting and reconfiguring, right? Like the process of rebirth. It's like it's interesting on its own terms, okay, but like it isn't really compatible with like any of the like what we're doing in Vajrayana and like why any of it works, or like you know what I mean? Like the underlying systems just aren't there. I'm actually kind of interested in how he synthesizes it in its own terms, but like I don't pretend that it's a version of what I'm doing. I would love to talk to him about it in depth, but um, yeah, it's just something radically incompatibly different.
There is a certain former professor, perhaps, of Germanic languages that has talked about neo mythologies before. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him at all, Solar. By
Yeah, I've heard something about that. I don't know.
well, I just think like yeah, I get what you're saying. He's using a neo mythology on like it doesn't really work. It's not super compatible. No, it's not. I agree with that, and I that's where I've come into conflict with him because I just find it just I don't know. It lacks any kind of like ontological value. I don't know. Maybe that's harsh, but that's what I find. I'm not a magic alien person. Like that's never going to capture me, right? Like that's never going to be a standpoint for me, and I'm not a millenarian either. So like you can't like set a point in history and then tell me X, Y, and Z is going to happen. Like if it happens, then I could be like, okay, like let's reappraise the idea, but it's never going to really sell me. But I'm a skeptic at heart, so I don't know. Solar, please go ahead. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say one thing I do appreciate him, and I see a kindred approach in a way, right? Is the reason I swung hard and came back into Dharma is simply because it, in my experience, seemed true. Like it did the best job of explaining things that I was like looking at in terms of meditative experience and stuff like that, right? Like I didn't get back into it because it like sounded cool, or I wanted to like get laid by getting into Zugchen. That's a really bad idea in case anyone was thinking about it. Right. So it's anyway, it's experience driven, right? It's like does this survive contact with quote unquote reality? But in this case, it's the internal reality of appearances and phenomenal experience, right? My awareness. For Giorgiani, yes, he is this grand weaver of myth, but if you look at like what he appeals to, he's still fairly academic in the traditional sense in a weird way, right? Like a lot of his commitments to the mechanics of like what he calls reincarnation, we would call rebirth, whatever, respawning, right? He's appealing to kind of interesting and fairly innovative studies that track like children with profound and potentially verifiable past life memories, right? Stuff like that. Because there are a lot of bullshit artists. There are a lot of weavers of grand tales, like in our kind of business, if you want to call it that, right? And so I do appreciate that like Giorgiani kind of ebbs and flows. He takes his cues not, I mean, half of from what sounds cool, and he's definitely like sympathetic to like what's fucking cool, right? Like he's good at that, like props, right? But also like he is attempting to harmonize as much as possible with kind of the latest and greatest in parapsychology research and this and that, right? And so there is like at least like a degree of seriousness there and rigor there, an attempt to bring those concerns together that like I fucking respect it. It's not just that I think he's putting out cool, interesting stuff, but like I do respect the method.
Oh, I do too, and I can see the parallels between certain left-hand path institutional organizations and their sort of appreciation of Lovecraftian mythos, maybe also like certain branches of the OTO as well. But like, yeah, of course, it's exactly the same thing. I mean, it is kind of like, I mean, it's just building meta mythology. It's just neo mythology, but into sort of like the greater pattern of, I don't know, relative truth. I agree, though. He's interesting. I don't think he's not interesting. Like, let me be clear. It's like in the same way that I find Nick Land interesting. Like, I don't agree with a lot of his stuff, like 98%. Yes, that's a magic number. But yes, I don't agree. And that's the same with Jason. I don't agree with most of it. Like, okay, so Jason, like 77%. I don't agree. But I can embrace like the idea and the idea. I can embrace that he's wrong. It doesn't bother me. Like, yeah, I can think he's wrong. He can think he's right. That's fine. Let's come into a little conflict sometimes. Like, that's okay. But I understand that that's not always like how other people think. I know that's like a little more solipsistic, right? But I just, I just feel like, yeah, I'm happy to I'm happy to host is what is what I'll say to Jason. Like I'm happy to have you on my show. I would love to have all the co-hosts on, and we could have very interesting discussion. I just think that, like, and I appreciate like you're trying to weave like a neo mythology for the new Aeon. Like that's exactly what we're trying to fucking do too. So at least that's what I think. Solar, please go ahead.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm gonna have to run. So I want to say, this is really fun discussion. Thanks for having me on and for everyone else for chiming in, participating. So yeah, I just wanted to wish you guys all a good night and tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I do want to say close on a remark of Jason. I'm with you 100%. Every single word. I will fly the suicide nuke jet into the gates of the Antarctic Hyperborean base. I'm your strongest soldier. I will make the ultimate sacrifice. Please come on, Threshold Saints. All right, take it easy, guys.
Thanks, Naga. You did great, honestly. Everybody did great, but yeah, Solar, it was really nice to hear you again. And like, obviously, we all do this. I think I realized this today, and I know we didn't have the chat we weren't talking about it in Grey Lodge, we were talking about it in Weeb Chat. Just like how, like, yeah, it was kind of hard. Like even before COVID, like let's just say, like there a lot of you were online, like in 2016, like and doing the meme warrior shit. Like I get it. Like I get it. Like you are all doing your thing way before me. And so it must be it must be such a burnout. And like we were joking in the chat, like Avi was joking in the chat, like the Zuccotti Park arc. Like, yeah, like that's the same. That's like for every fucking millennial. Like every fucking millennial. Every single one. We have all gone through like weird leftist arcs. Most people have. Because we were normalized to that. And I'm not saying it's bad or good. I'm not even giving it like a valuation. I'm just saying I think that we have to reappraise the ideas for their own value. And I think that's what whatever the dissident right used to be, I think that that's what it could be. Like, not dissident right, like fuck labels, right? but like we're also saying like what could possibility be. Well, let's actually reappraise like all ideas and look at them and say like what actually is like meaningful. And maybe it's not about politics, maybe it's more about our own minds, our own consciousness, our own lives. I think that's way more powerful, and I think that the idea of giving agency back to people, I think like yeah, some people will go choose and watch college football or high school football and drink beer, and that's fine. You cannot you can't really be a sovereign over someone else in like a fundamental way, and it's definitely not an aeonic idea, and you're not going to pull low consciousness people out. And when I'm calling people low consciousness, I'm not talking about normies or npcs or anything. I'm talking about, the truth is there are different kinds of people who have rebirth from other beings. I know people find this very weird and very like woo, and usually I wouldn't go here, but I actually think it's useful. You can be a naga and look like a human. You can be a ghost and look like a human. Because where are you a ghost? Where are you a naga? That's not some kind of reptilian David Icke bullshit. No. But is he talking about something that could be fundamentally real? Yes. He's talking about processes of consciousness, fundamental, like sort of appearance existence. Someone can appear as a human, but they're not human. Whoa, that's really profound, right? Okay, yeah, thank you, Buddhism, for the last 2,000 years. But, anyways, regardless of that, people can be different, sort of, they can exist. Maybe this is an easier way to think about a different framework, but the same, also tantric, is that you can actually exist at different levels of consciousness or the worlds, if you want to use the tree. You can exist at different worlds and still exist in the same time space as we all are right now. That's pretty interesting, right? So you can be a low world person. That doesn't mean you're bad. It doesn't mean anyone's bad. We all travel through the tree, as we've all discussed. So you will go through different processes of consciousness. There's nothing wrong with that. What is problematic is where you get stuck in low stages of consciousness when you should be trying to go higher, or you get stuck at middling layers of consciousness because you feel comfortable. That is what fundamentally we talk about without going to extremes, right? But knowing that you can draw ideas from both sides and both hands and synthesize and rectify the karmas that you've done. I don't know. I just think that idea is interesting. But, don't get caught up worshiping klipas. That's why I don't like the pagan reconstruction thing. I just think I don't agree with like the full on, like I don't think anyone really agrees with like the full on you are God. Like no, we're too imperfect to really embody what that is. Let's be honest. Even at higher apotheosis, maybe as a human in the like desire worlds, we're still too imperfect to really totally embody what that is. So that doesn't seem fundamentally true. So then we say, okay, well, there's something that's more essential than self. So there's something more essential than being trapped in the cycle of reincarnation. In fact, we are in a cycle of rebirth, meaning we get to choose. So I think that's really profound. And I think that that is actually like American Dharma fundamentally. Telling people non dual consciousness, learn to fucking meditate. Yeah, learn a little bit about magic. Every fucking buddy uses it. Everybody uses it. People are totally joking themselves. Like I don't know if these like people on like the dregs of the dissident right, like I don't know if are they being legit when they're talking about like, oh, Kabbalah is not really real. It's like, yeah, I can see your PFP colors. Like, what are you talking about? Oh, by the way, Jay Dyer blocked me after like 2 or 3 years of being mutuals, simply because I said he was calling someone heterodox. And all I said in response was, you are in no position using those PFP colors to call someone quote unquote heterodox. That's not even that mean. And he blocked me for that. And then all these like ortho bros came for me. Anyways, but the point is, like everybody's using magic. Everybody's having these kinds of like ideas, like this wisdom science kind of like reality / wisdom science, like reified at all times consistently. Like, we're seeing it, we're studying it, we're seeing it, we're studying it. How much of it is our own minds? How much of it is our own input? That's what you have to ask yourself. And then also, like, how much of that is your own will? I'm not saying I'm perfect at this. I'm not. And you also have to learn to do this in the decoherent landscape. And that's why I like the Aeon of the Daughter framework, because it's very much like the arrow is just flying across the water. The fiery arrow is constantly in motion. It's like, we're not stopping. We're not going to, stop at some bullshit. Like, if you choose to get off, that's fine. I don't mean it like that. I mean, if you choose not to follow the arrow, that is your choice. But I think if you want to, I think that it offers at least some solutions to the current, like, we'll call it, I won't call it crisis of capitalism. We won't turn full on leftoid. We're not. I'm still not a leftoid. But I think that it offers some solutions to, like, the crisis of the turning. And I think fundamentally the crisis begins in your own mind. So study wisdom science, meditate, learn to breathe better, eat healthier, diet, exercise. Like, yeah, so there's some ideas from the distant right that are really matter. Like being outside, touching grass. Like, yeah, that's actually important, yo. It really is. It's also important, like we're talking about, like pagan reconstructionism. Like, yeah, fuck all those guys. Obviously, I don't mean it like that. I mean, like, I'm not into any of that shit. But you want to talk about, like, what would be a fundamental, like, geo-regional animism. We've talked about this so many times. How to establish relations, kinship relations, familial relations with the land that you dwell upon. Doesn't mean that you're born there. Doesn't mean that you, like, are offering, like, lambs to it. Just like, how do you offer relation to? Well, um, you stand, like, with it. This would be a very indigenous ontological way to, like, describe it. Like, you'd stand with your bare feet on the land. And I even described this in my episode with Zan and Matt Murrah. As I said, like, one of the indigenous ways to, like, greet the earth is to, like, scoop down and touch it during the eagle dance or the sun dance. Both. But it's the same motion. It's like the eagle swooping down to touch the land and then it goes back up. It's the acknowledgement that the ground we dwell on is the primordial one. It's outside of time and space. Well, it's in the infinite space, but yeah, it's outside of time and space, so to say. So yeah, and we are guided through with bodhicitta. So I think the Aeonic concepts honestly provide the simplest, easiest, most, like, free for all, but also, like, discerning. It's not do what thou will. It's do what thou will with care, attention, and love. So I think millennials actually have these tools if they learn to stop being so libtarded. I think if we kind of, like, pull back in, like often we talk about, like, wielding the true Gevratic fire, pulling back in and saying, like, what is our cultural conditioning versus, like, what is our will? That's a really useful exercise for millennials because a lot of them don't know, is what I'm realizing. So anyways, I'm sorry, Joshua, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I was just thinking as you were talking, and I think because we're talking about the right wing thing. What I've noticed is there's almost like an allergic reaction to Judaism, for for good reasons, of course, but it's like Christianity's ran so hard in another direction to get away from Judaism that they've kind of, like, lost the roots of their own religion, and I think we're beginning to see the symptoms of a spiritual sickness, if you will, because it's like when you try to transplant a tree, it may not do well on the spot that you're trying to put it in, and I think that what happens in some of these communities that I've witnessed is a bit of an identity crisis. Some of them will still want to be Christian and white nationalist or something like that, and some of these ideas begin to contradict one another, and they have, like, cognitive dissonance occur. And I think that when they encounter, maybe this explains, like, your Jay Dyer experience. Not that he's an example of this necessarily, but people block people like that, I think. But when they know they're not going to be able to have discourse, because they're very rigid, maybe. And see, he's I think he's part of the Orthodox Church. So, by nature, he's going to be very rigid. And if he has to debate somebody that's not basically within his wheelhouse, then, he's going to probably respond in that way, I think. But what you were saying about the eagle dance really intrigued me because, it reminded me also maybe when a eagle dives down to get a fish out of the water. That might be another example, but with different elements. And then also, the eagle doesn't attack the snake on the ground, but for a brief moment. It then takes it into the air and deals with it there to get it out of its element. So both the fish and the snake, snake's like a terrestrial, fish is an aquatic. The eagle, once it gets it into its element, it then is able to master it, and dominate it. But anyway, just the I didn't expect our conversation to kind of wade into those waters of the white national stuff. So I just thought I'd share my views with that because I think it's kind of intriguing. And I wonder about the future of our country because of things like that, because some of these oligarchs and foreigners that have become very powerful in our country, like Peter Thiel, for instance, he's not American, Elon Musk, etc. These people kind of are ideological and to a point that it's almost like they have a religion of their own in a sense, and they're kind of redefining Christianity, quote unquote. And so I do kind of wonder if we're going to have like a weird Gilead, Handmaid's Tale kind of weird, dystopia or something, just because it's become so far removed from its original, source that it would become something radically different that wouldn't even be recognized, maybe by the people that started it. Anyway, I just wanted to share those thoughts. Thank you.
Well, I'll just say this. I'm going to put on my prognosticator's tiny cap right now. Look, I said this even before. America will always have weird Christianity. You're never going to contain it. You couldn't contain it in the traditional churches. You can't contain it in the mega churches. It can't be contained in the mall strip churches. It can't be contained in the scripture. People who are sola scriptura are just as retarded as people who are like extremely institutionally dogmatic. Like, it's just the reality. I'm sorry. It's just like this, especially the Twitter fighting about Christianity, like whose version is more real. Okay, yes, there is honestly a good theological arguments to be had about this, and I do have opinions about it, but it is bullshit at the end of the day. It is like totally fake, has nothing to do with processes of consciousness, nothing to do with treating. I'm interested in what is the best Christianity to use as a hermeneutic for magic? That would be my question. That's the only question that I would really be interested in engaging with on Twitter in terms of like these like theological discourses, because the Martinists are able to do shit with their magic. They were able to do Solomonic works. So the Catholics, obviously the Rosicrucians, they were able to do stuff. And the Greek Orthodox, all the Ortho bros are fucking magicians. You think I haven't sat in group chats with them when they're talking about like doing this left hand path meditation magic? Oh my god. You can just go on Discord and like go like sit in the chat and they'll talk about this, or Telegram or whatever. So, and they like we've talked about this a million times. Their cross is a Kabbalistic tree. I mean, there's no running away from it. They have a wisdom science now. Are they great at it? I don't know. I kind of think that their discourse is stupid, to be honest. And I was right, by the way, to call Jay Dyer out for saying the heterodox thing. If you're doing Kabbalah, I don't care what he calls it. You can't call someone heterodox and then you're talking about like, oh, demons, magic. That's so dumb. You know wisdom science is real and you're putting klipas in front of people. Just don't talk about it at all. That silence, right? The word of silence is the key word of the true magi. If you don't have anything to like speculate on or to like bring the Kabbalah forward, then just don't talk about it. If you don't want people to know that you're doing it, don't call people demonic and like, oh, magic is so evil. Oh, okay. You're the only one who's allowed higher process of consciousness. And like to even use pink and that neon green, Like, are you kidding? Just doing Hode-like colors. There's several other podcasters who I've noticed have really moved hard into the Aeonic colors that we've talked about for over 2 years almost, or a year and a half. It's pretty crazy, to be honest. You can even see it. Like, you can see it for yourselves. That's what's so interesting. So a lot of our wisdom science things that we talk about are provable in reality. That's what they don't like. I'll tell you right now. That's what people like Jay Dyer, their rigidity. It's fake. It's just a veneer. It's totally brittle. It's totally klipothic. It's like spray paint. And so that's what their power of their magic is. Yeah, he can get 200 likes. Great. He can have a viral tweet here and there. He can go on Alex Jones. Great. Instead of like telling people like demons and angels and practicing the same Solomonic magic that didn't work for the last 600 years, and it didn't work because people people took it in the stupid, very limited, ignorant direction of duality. That doesn't mean the texts are even written with strict dualism in mind. You could say that there's a proto non-dual element. You can see in a lot of the Jewish wisdom texts. You can see that they're talking about like the angels and the demons being like shadows of each other, sort of like both good and bad forces in and of themselves, and like what it means, right? Like Joshua and I did an episode with Jamie Paul Lamb about this, like Astro Goesha. He said the exact same thing, and he's in the Golden Dawn. I'm not saying you should like bow down to any like institutional magician or anything. I would never tell you that. I'm just saying that he seemed to really understand fundamental reality, and in a very Kabbalistic way, in a very like non-dual essentially way. And he didn't even do like the Solomonic rituals. He used like tarot cards, certain flavors, perfume. This is a way. I'm telling you, this is like what all the higher level magicians are doing. Nobody is doing strict ceremonial magic anymore. And I'm not casting aspersions on it, but I think it does touch on your question, Joshua. Is like people losing touch with the traditionality. Look, the Salem was not about. I know this is going to sound really off topic, but it really, I promise, it's about Martinism and like American magic. Really, it's the fundamental nature of American magic. The Salem, the witch trials, was not about quote unquote witchcraft. It was about the Solomonic seals that everybody was hiding in their Bibles. So people would have different pieces of the text, and like then the brother would inherit like this piece or this page. They would try and put them together. This is a very real history. Owen Davies wrote a whole book on this. Anyways, you can read the Martinist diaries like very easily. I think they're all online. But I think that the point that I'm making is that people have always done things syncretically, because if you only have a piece of the text, a piece of the seed, or what you perceive as the piece of the seed, you're going to fixate on those things. Like, I hate to bring up the Mormon example, but it's a really well-known one. He had seals of Mars and Jupiter. Those are really great seals to have because they exert a lot of power on all three worlds. But those forces, the fire and the lightning, also exist within ourselves. So, at different layers, but still within ourselves. So, I think that American Dharma is like recognizing that exists, that we have to do multiple things. It's like, yeah, fitness culture by itself is really vapid and really, it's like, I don't know. I just find it very, I don't know. I just don't like how people do it on Twitter. I'm talking about like the Nietzschean vitalists, kind of like right wing bros. I just find it very like, just strikes me as very like prostitution, if I'm being honest. I know that's really harsh, but that is how I feel about it. So but what I'm trying to say is that like any of those shallow cultures are not going to be the fullness in and of themselves. Just like with wisdom science, we talked about this the other day in the chat, how astrology is so bullshit. 98%. It's not that astrology in and of itself is bullshit. It's just that the people presenting it are bullshit. Just like the people presenting politics online are bullshit. Like, we're trying to tell you about culture, or what culture to believe in, or what culture to venerate. Like, there's all these Trad West accounts, like everybody knows about it. That's not real either. That's just an aesthetic that you have no idea of the meaning of. Yeah, okay, you read Plotinus, great. That's wonderful. Where did Plotinus take you? So you're going to worship like a statue, a marble statue of like a young youth? Like, that's kind of weird. I don't know. I think that that's weird. That doesn't seem very American to me. Anyways, and yeah, I am a little more white than I am brown, so I just want to say that. But I agree with what Solar said about Evola and the race thing, that being at 3 levels. That makes sense, very Buddhist, right? Race is just one expression of karma. It's not a big deal. And then the other 3 layers, which is consciousness and achievement. Yeah, sorry, Joshua, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not real familiar with Plotinus, but as you described it, I was thinking of how the Giga Chad kind of has got a foothold in society, like especially with the conservative type folks. But you mentioned Mr. Lamb, so I wanted to kind of chime in on that chorus there. Yeah, that episode rocks. I would really highly recommend anybody listen to it. And I think especially even beginners to this type of stuff, because I think he done a very good job making it relatable, and he was able to basically, you know, deliver his wisdom and easy to digest way, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, give that a listen. And one of the things that kind of stuck with me about what he said was he kind of described the correspondences as being like links of chain extending from the earth, you know, into the heavens. And so each link in that chain was like a different correspondence, you know, at various levels within the Sephiroth tree, you know, as you know, go from earth out into outer space or whatever. So you know, whether it be an animal or a mineral or a color or whatever. So his approach to magic in general, I found very practical, just because of his way of thinking. It aligned a lot with mine. But anyway, give that a listen. And the question I had for Jen maybe was that, you know, if indeed we did see some type of uh, emergence, I guess, of a new religion or political party or whatever, I was just kind of theorizing in my head, like, what would it have to do or achieve to be successful? Like, what part of the tree do you think is really lacking here? Like, are these rites of passage? You know, because you know, our government, it's kind of been rumored that they kind of keep us at like a teenager level, right? Like in the teens. And so I think it's like an arrested development kind of thing. So I wonder, you know, is that like a certain part on the tree where they've tried to keep us, and then like something's going to come along that just kind of like pushes that out of the way, and it's a different part of the tree? You know, I just kind of was thinking about it in terms like that, and what a group like that might, what would be the recipe for success. And I guess that would be different for each turning. You know, every time there's a turning, there's going to be a different matching, um, different match. Anyway, I think I've said enough about that.
Okay, this is, you want to know, I don't know the mass religion. I don't know what that's going to be. I don't really care. I'm not trying to be like the Marxism of religion or whatever. Like, I don't care. I don't care what the normies worship. It doesn't affect my life. I'm not going to live under like Christian, like right wing nationalism. That sounds really boring. And like, I'll pretend, sure, we can do that thing where I go to mass every day. I've done that, so no big deal. But I'm just saying, I don't think that sounds that fun. Like, they're very scoldy. I'm not even saying do bad things. I'm anti do bad things. But everything that I think is cool, they're like, oh, is this bad? Anime is evil. Smoking pot is evil. Art is evil. Film is evil. Why? I'm a big boy. I discern what is in my mediatic landscape, my mediatic ecology. There's an element that we don't control. There's an element that we're all terminally online to a degree. So yeah, we get polluted by the ghost worlds. That's true. That's what makes doing the practices so important right now, especially if you're going to be on the in the ghost worlds, right? It's one of those crazy things. But I don't know. I think, like, okay, so you want the secret? What do you want? Yeah, like, you know what this? Yeah, I think you know, Joshua. I think everybody knows the Aeonic secret, the Aeonic religion secret temple. I think is the aeon of the inner temple is going to be mystical Christianity to some degree. So we have to tolerate the, you know, the more esoteric ortho, yes, Jewish, and maybe even the more Sufist, and like all that shit, like all the Rosicrucian revivalists, like, yeah, those people are fine. That's part of the quote unquote, I hate that word, coalition. That would be a true synthesis because they're studying wisdom science too. They may not have the same perspective or the same sort of conclusions, but you know, we can fuck with that. And then, so that's more inner temple, and then the secret temple is Aeon of the Daughter, which is like more Dharma build. So that's what it is. It's like taming the yakshas outside and inside your own mind and in the world. That's basically what I think. I think we're very much Aeonic. I think we've done secret temple things, and I didn't really realize it until more recently. I think we talked about things that were very taboo, and I think I wanted to talk about them because they felt taboo, but I don't think they were actually taboo, as I said at the beginning. I think it was that the right wing was so anti everything that we were, like, just trying to talk about, like, not trying to be crazy about, just like, you know, we're going to talk about ideas. Maybe we're not going to say race matters that much. Yeah, we'll crack a J joke here and there, but it's not, you know, it's not this, you know, like as Solar said, we're a multiracial group. Like, yeah, we're all American now, basically. But which is good, and I actually prefer that. I think that, as I said, I know it sounds very Americo supremacist, but I do think that the idea that you can be free, I think just even the seed of the idea, I think is actually really important. I don't think everybody feels that. And I think that's one of the spiritual and cultural, both layers of race. This kind of third worldism, this third world mindset of like, you must replicate like village life. Like, no, this is America. It's 2025. I don't need to replicate the same hierarchies that you do in like the jungle. And you know, so I think that that's where people are coming into so much conflict with like the immigration question or problem, because it's really both. So I think because it's like people are not turning at the same pace. Their wheel is not turned at the same pace. And I'm not saying progressive. I'm saying that they are just not operating from the same perspective, the same view, the same timeline. They're moving in a different timeline. They're moving in step with their own wheel, whatever that is. So I think that is a cause of a lot of world conflicts. I do think that they do understand Joshua to a degree, but I do think that the political elite, quote unquote, they're not really elite. They just know wisdom science to some degree through some institution or another. Some of them are, you know, quote unquote deep state. Yeah, that's true. Some of them are. I can name them off right now. I won't, but I'll just say there's tells. So you know, it is what it is. You're never going to fully control it until you control yourself. That's number one. That's being truly agential. It's like, can we really influence the parapolitical model? Not really. But we can really, spiritually, psychically, aeonically. Maybe we don't have to think their ideals are the highest ideals. Maybe worldly power and wealth. Maybe that Tiferatic layer, that kind of Klapothic Tiferatic layer you were asking, like, to map on the tree. Yeah, they all get stuck there. They all get stuck there. Why? Because they're Saturnian in their desire, meaning they're fixed. They're Tiferatic in that they want to be the splendor of the worlds, worshipped as a god. But alas, just men. But that's okay, right? Because it's like I always call us like speculatively neo-Gnostic. Like, it's okay. Yeah, people are flawed. It's okay. That's the nature of samsara. That's the nature of the world. That's what I don't like about the Christian sort of like right. They're so rigid. People can change. People can have they can experience worlds of like it's all up to you what kind of life you want. I'm not saying I'm perfect or my life is perfect. I don't think that at all. What I think, though, is that we do get a degree of our own agency. And when you start to apply that thinking to magic and you start to apply non duality to magic, or it doesn't have to even be magic, it's not even about magic. It's just about questioning, like, what is love? What is bodhicitta? What is non duality? And how can I apply that to practice? And then I think you can really go somewhere. And then I think it's all verifiable in and of yourself. I think all wisdom science is like this. I think the texts actually serve to verify experience rather than teach us how to get there, if you want the truth. I've said this before. I like Chokmah, or Hokmah. I like Droyan. I like the crazy wisdom. It's an imperfect way to travel the tree, though. It really is. Because it's so impermanent that it's hard to get anywhere. You have to travel through, if you want to use the tantric example, you have to use the smoke of the world as the sort of Shakti or the force for the Vahana to go where you want to go. That's not a great way to travel, though, because you eventually run out of smoke. So there's more desirable Sephiroth is what I'm saying. Droyan is not a perfect way. So that's why you meet it with Binah. That's why you meet it with text. So you're doing form and formlessness together. But you're not going to stay there. You're going to dip down for some higher knowledge, which is also liberatory, which is also very powerful, can be in your choice, or you're going to go together. But like when Solar was talking about it, like ejection from the cube, like I've said that thing before, like we've talked about it before, and I've said, if I could get there, I would eject myself. But I actually don't know if it is possible aeonically. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm not saying moksha is not possible. I'm saying moksha is possible. But this question is nebulous in Tantra. What is moksha? It depends on the aeon and the kalpa. It really does. And I think the aeon of the daughter is really about hyperspace kingdom. We've talked about this before. So I think it opens up a new door to like a kind of like different sort of altered reality. But I also think that's experiential at our layer. It's a process of consciousness. It all is. Whether we understand it perfectly as that or not, it really is all processes of consciousness. It's where we choose to reside. I know I've been negative before, for sure. Have I been mean, angry, acerbic? Yeah, for sure. But what's the totality of it? I can be super polite, be nice, schwayang. That's more me. That's more how I am most of the time. But do you ever get remembered for the things you are most of the time? No. You get remembered for those kind of violent moments in consciousness where it kind of like jars you. So that's why you remember those things. So that's why it's good to examine those things and to also let them go. Anyways, we're going to end it here. I think that was really fun and we did great. So I'm going to shout out Mr. Matmura, who I hope he really enjoyed himself at the concert. He is experiencing America for the first time, and he couldn't believe that. Everybody drives a truck. Yeah, I drive a truck. A lot of people drive a truck. Not a big. I don't drive like a big truck, just like a like a normie. It's not a really normie truck. It's the Chud truck, I guess. But yeah, that's in Canada. That's what it's considered, right? The Chud truck. But it's necessary. You can't really live in the world to not have it. Anyways, the point is Mamura is having a lot of fun, but he is a great brother. He built our website, The True Grey Lodge, the TRVE GreyLodge.com, where you can listen to episodes of Threshold Saints, this show, which is also on YouTube, The Grey Lodge. Like and subscribe, please. We really appreciate it. And Solar Exile, who does have pieces on Metamagic and sort of like ritual grammars. I don't know. He never really told me. He kind of did, but he's mysterious like that. So I think that's what it's about. But if I'm wrong, he'll correct me. So that's fine. I'll take it. So he has things in the works and things that are already done. So we're looking forward to those. You can listen to the episode with BD Salerno. We talked about the sort of astro Kabbalah, really, of Elvis's birth chart, which I think was really interesting since she's interested particularly in the placement of asteroids, which is Ketu, basically. You can just translate those two things. Neptune and asteroids can be sort of understood to be Ketu itself. So we talk about that. And he has other placements that we talk about. Of course, I'm not an astrologer, but through Kabbalah and the Yetziradic astrology, yes, I do understand to a degree. So you can check that out. You can also check out. I forgot if it's coming out now or like I didn't set it yet. I might not have scheduled it, but it's ready to go. So it's called No Curses for Old Men, which I think is an amazing title, and it is a pure Vajrayana episode. Basically, we just talk about American Dharma, the most tantric practices you can talk about like safely, and it was a really fun episode, and I didn't realize how much I loved being looked up to as a senior practitioner. It felt so cool. So that's that for me. Solar Matt, Mike. I'll let Mike outro himself, and Joshua. Joshua, do you want to outro yourself? And I'll do a quick room shout out before I'll let you guys outro. So we have Avi, of course, Bullbrave Free. Thank you so much for coming. Dakini of the Lodge, appreciate you greatly. We have Zachary Shumar, who is my co-host from Threshold Saints. He's been on a lot of episodes, like 5 episodes. I think 5 episodes. Hopefully we're going to do Dawn to Dawn. And John, of course, thank you so much, John, for coming. Appreciate you, of course. I missed you the last couple spaces, but I'm glad that you caught us tonight. And Elijah, not sure who you are, but Elijah Pendragon, cool. Silent participation. I'm sorry, my mouth is very dry. I have a drink somewhere. So that's that. So basically, I'll let Mike and Joshua say something, and then I'll say something, and then we'll go.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say I just finished the episode with I think it was Thresholds or not, excuse me, Cult Rejects, but it was on the Threshold Saints Spotify thing. Solar and you um, were talking with Stephen Flowers. Sorry I stumbled over it so much, but the Runa and all that, and I just found that very interesting to listen to. So, just wanted to encourage folks to go find that. It might even be the latest episode I think that you've dropped. But yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for hosting, and as always, Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you so much, brother Joshua. Really appreciate you. It was cool to have us, like so many of us, be here at one time. Of course, we are meta magicians, so this is kind of like, yeah, we are magic and consent. Yeah, we talked more about material things, but I think that's important, right? Because the timeline feels so decoherent, it feels so unreal. Maybe it's useful for us for a sort of like a inverse. We're not saying inverse as in like invert the world, but we're saying invert, excuse me, the negative polarity of the timeline. Maybe we're inverting it by talking about material pragmatic concerns. I think that's more interesting, actually. It's not about going against. I think this was the question of generations too, like to go against the Gen X, like not to be Gen X. I mean, who are just reactionary. That's what they are. They're not really rebels. They believe themselves to be rebels, but they're reactionary against the boomers. Millennials are kind of blasé, apathetic, you could say, because we are about consensus. And so our thing has always been like irony humor. So irony humor is very apathetic. It's kind of like I'll make a joke, I'll make a post, and that's the totality of it. That's the weight of it. It's kind of like doesn't matter. You're not so attached, but you don't want to lose the approval of the in group either. So you're willing to perform at certain levels to sort of like maintain the world around you. I'm not saying to be a like bridge burner. I actually don't think that that's necessarily my best quality personally, but I don't think it's my worst quality either. Meaning that I've really have tried, whether I'm successful or not, that's a different story. But I have tried to sort of reappraise doing so rashly. I don't think it's negative to totally cut people off. Where I think the problem is being so ready to do it. So I think that there's things in the millennial nature, we'll call it, that are actually good inclinations, but when they become quote unquote impulses, that's where to temper it and say, is that the right thing or is that just my feelings? Right? Like you control where the lightning goes. Yeah, sometimes the lightning strikes way down deep, but you have to redirect it. Think of Avatar. We talk about this all the time. Avatar: The Last Airbender. How do you defeat the lightning benders? You redirect it, like the chi. That's the whole thing. That's why even I chose the metaphor of the mountain, because the clouds rotate around the mountain. The mountain itself is, as I said, is the world axis. Which mountain? All of them. The mountain is yourself. That's also what the Vajra is. That's also what the Kila is. It's not some separate thing from yourself. Hey, DeMorgan, what's up? Great to see you here. Appreciate it. We're just about to close, but yeah, I'm glad you came. At least you got a shout out. And of course, shout out to everybody who came. Appreciate you. Mike, do you want to say anything? Oh, Joshua.
Just thank you. I mean, just thank you for having me as always. I have nothing to plug, but always appreciate being a part of the conversation and love being here. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you too. Everybody should follow Mike. Everybody should follow Joshua. Everybody should follow Solar. Everybody should follow Matt. Everybody should follow Seth, Bibliomancer. Thank him for coming. Everybody should follow all of you. Because that's what it is. It's like I always say, like the Aeonic ideal is love over will. That's not a negation, though, right? It's not a negation. We're not doing that dualism. I think that is what sort of the political discourse, like what is discourse? Discourse is the two dragons running together. The Rahu and the Ketu. The lightning and the smoke. Right? So what do we make of that? Well, my thing is the Aeon of the Daughter, obviously. And so I say it's up to us. And whether that is individuated or in mass, in the ipsos, that's up to us. But it also begins with you. So maybe it's individuated since the beginning, which is an interesting sort of positionality. And you can say that is the true kind of American Dharma, is to say, actually, my own consciousness comes first because it's what I can control. It's sort of the kingdom, my own property is your mind. Anyway, sorry, Joshua, please go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll be brief. Pardon for protracting the space, but as you were talking and talking about the lightning and the earth and all that, it is grounding that it's being achieved there. And I think I saw something this week that really intrigued me, that some of the new generation there's this trend of just sitting in silence without any stimulus for like 15 minutes at a time and removing all electronics and stuff from themselves. And I just thought that was really remarkable. So, I thought maybe a component of what we will see in the future will be some type of redeclaration of what it is to be human, maybe somewhat of a Luddite rejection of technology or something, and this maybe grounding ourselves spiritually, so to speak, in a way. I don't know. Kind of reminds me of Dune, how they outlawed thinking machines and stuff. But anyway, thank you. I just wanted to add that last thought.
I mean, that's what it's. I mean, speculative fiction, science fiction, is obviously one possibility, but it's a possibility that has to take root in your own consciousness. What story do you believe in? What mythology do you believe in? Do you believe in any at all? How deep is the belief? Is the belief fixed? Is it eternalist? Or is it more liberatory? Well, I like the neo Gnostic framework simply because I find it liberatory in the way that we talk about it. I'm not saying that all neo Gnosticism is like that. I don't think that. I'm not about worshiping the pantheon of Gnostic saints. Like, I'm not about that. I'm not about worshiping like the worldly gods or the heavenly gods. Like, yeah, certain ones that are like more understood to have like higher enlightened value, I guess. I like that's fine. Whatever people can do is all well. Like, I'm not trying to create the world religion. I'm trying to say, like, there's a secret religion here right now of the Aeon of the Daughter that exists also in just the story that we've told of it over the last year and a half. So, sort of, we've created, in a really interesting way, Joshua, we've created the sort of way to thread the needle. Now, does that mean anyone's going to take of it and be like, yeah, this is the story, this is the vehicle? Secretly, I think it is. Secretly, I think it is, and I think it's provable. I think I'm building a case for it. I think I'm seeing it so much in like the mediatic landscape, the mediatic ecology. I think that it's undeniable that there is something, that there are other people, at least other people, like Teddy Park, as I always say, Teddy Park of Blackpink, Meow, Nmix, all of these things that are talking about love, heartsick girls, burning up, heatless flame. I mean, it's all there. It's all there. It's so much there. It's like, it's crazy, like drawing the lightning from the sky. I mean, he's talking about it. He's like, him and I were like competing sons. Like, he's seeing something, daughter, and I'm seeing something too. And it's like, who's gonna win? But maybe it's not about winning. Maybe it's just about seeing the same thing. And like, he interprets it into music. I'm not saying it's good music. I don't really think it's that good music, but I'm not saying it's good or bad. It is what it is. So I just think like there is something that is taking shape in reality. Now, what do we want to believe? I don't know. I'm not you. I can't tell anyone what to believe or what to do. I don't think I should, and I don't think I would. And I'm not going to. But I can say that this is like about speculative ideas, and sort of like that magic is real. Now, once we like go off space and we sort of like delimit, we sort of come back down to material reality, come back down to Malkuth, come back down to the kingdom. Once we do that, maybe we don't believe what we talked about. I'm not saying I believe it. I clearly believe it. I'm full on Aeon. Like, don't get it twisted. But I'm just saying, like, you get to choose, and you also get to choose what narratives you believe, what influencers you follow. You, as Matt would say, you get to curate your own timeline. This is your thing. This is your consciousness. This might be ghost world consciousness. I agree. This is the fucking ghost world. But in the ghost world, you still get a degree of choice. So exercise it in the limited way that we are able. That's what I think. I think that'll provide a lot more stability for people online. Anyways, I think that was an amazing space. Thank you so much to Morgan for coming. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Elijah. Thank you, John. Thank you, One Cancer. Thank you, Avi. Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Brother Mike. Thank you to all the other co-hosts. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter or at our website, thetruegraylodge.com, or YouTube, or my show, Threshold Saints, on Spotify and Apple. And sometimes on Occult Rejects. And yeah, basically that's where we at, Naga. So I hope everybody has a great night. Make sure you meditate. That's number one. We always talk about this, right? Meditate, study wisdom science, know your will. Keep it all in emptiness. Love is the cause of knowledge, obviously. What is love? Well, it's not sexual desire per se. I'm not saying it doesn't include that. I'm saying that it's not that, right? So maybe it's more discerning. I'm not saying telling people how to live. I'm not trying to be like a tradcath. I'm just saying it's more about the one than the none, but it's also more about the one than the 10 in some terms. But that's if you don't want to go Aeonic, that's fine. I'm just saying as an idea. Okay. So with that being said, thank you very much. This is the Grey Lodge Friday Night Gnostic Mass plus Ultra presents The Way of the Mountain God. 自然 Bark Null. So I'm Jin the Ninja. Peace out, Nagas. Everybody have a great night.